Council has been on a field trip. We're kind of like grade school kids. We have to have a recess every once in a while. We have to have recess every once in a while. So they've been on a field trip. They've been up looking at public works and the cemetery and the pump station for secondary water and some other things. They actually started on a little tour at 5:30, so they're just getting back. Marisa, welcome. We're glad you were here. Cassie won't be with us tonight, and we're blessed to have Marisa with us. We're glad to have her here. I might mention, just as a matter of housekeeping, before we start, we'd ask you if you have a cell phone, if you would silence it for the period of time that you're here with us. So we actually record this meeting, and it's being broadcast on the YouTube channel. And a stray phone going off is sometimes a little bit distracting, so we would ask you to check that if you wouldn't mind. Let's begin. Jordan, could I ask you to offer a prayer for us? And then Lisa, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Our Father in heaven, we are truly grateful we gathered together today as a council and citizens. We ask thee to please help us that we can know what is best for our city, that we can be granted the wisdom of Solomon, that as we approach the situations, that we can perhaps not always do what is popular, but we can do what is best. And please help us that we can also represent those that are in our city. Please bless those within our boundaries and that they can be safe. Please help us that we can be able to know thy will and be able to reach out to those around us and serve our neighborhoods and be able to make Syracuse even better. We are truly grateful for our many blessings and grateful for the weather we've been receiving and for the water. Please continue to fill our reservoirs and help us that we can be conservation minded. And we are truly grateful for all these many blessings. These things we pray in the name of thy Son and our Savior Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Council. For the purpose of the record, this is the Syracuse City Council work session of March 26, 2019. We are convened in the large conference room at the municipal building. We, for the benefit of those that are new to our city meetings and how we conduct them, years ago, and after the Civil War, there was a civil engineer by the name of Roberts, was his last name. He was a general, but he was a civil engineer, and he was instrumental in the protecting of both New York City and Philadelphia during the Civil War. And after the Civil War, strange as it may seem, he was from a little town, and he was asked to conduct some kind of a community meeting in his local church, and that turned into kind of a rat's nest. And so he thought there ought to be a way to conduct a meeting that would make it so that voices could be heard and that decisions could be made in a way that would be, there was an economy in a meeting that made things flow. So we have adopted a set of bylaws, and in those bylaws we have adopted Robert's Rules of Order. This is a work session, and in this work session we will be discussing many items. You can see we have, if you have a copy of the agenda, we have a lot of things to get through this evening. One of the things that we would like to do, we reserve twice in every public meeting an opportunity for the public to comment. In this particular meeting, seeing there are no public hearings being held tonight, this period at the beginning of the meeting, and there will be another period at the end of the meeting, will be times when free public comment could be made to the members of the council. we would ask you to limit your comments to those. So if there's an issue on here that you would like to speak to, this would be the appropriate time during these public comment meetings. When the council is discussing them, we will not be taking public comment. So if you have something that you'd like the council to hear, we'd invite you to take, if you just stand and so that I can recognize you. We'll offer you 3 minutes if you state your name and place of residence. For the record, and then we'll allow 3 minutes of comment. I'm going to ask Marisa if she would set a timer so that we know and we keep to that agenda. So if you would like to address anything that we're discussing here, let's start here.
Gary Oscarson, 1897 West, 3000 South. Just coming as a neighborhood, we in Trailside, many of us here are from Trailside, and our concern is that as we met with the Planning Commission and so forth, they've talked about changing the zoning to the area just east of us to PRD. And as they were talking, they were saying, okay, well, PRD's got the same density of housing that you have in Trailside. And we've heard rumors that there's people, some of our elected officials who are representing us, feel that the 5 units per acre is not enough, that it ought to be higher density housing. And we are very concerned with high density housing being that close to our area, the number of people, the number of cars going across the trail. We already have high density housing to the south of us and a freeway in our backyard. And you know, we're just want to preserve our property values and also preserve kind of the rural feel we have here in Syracuse. We came here because of some wide open spaces and we enjoy it, and we want other people to enjoy it as well. But you know, high density, you know, above 5 houses per acre seems to be getting pretty tight, and we would just appreciate if our representatives would represent us and make sure that it stays at that lower level. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Anyone else?
My name is Alan Prince. My address is in Lehigh. I'm here on behalf of Monterey Properties this evening, and only to, I was asked by the staff if we had a thought about this to come and weigh in on it, and that being the notion of reducing the side yard setbacks, in this case in a PRD zone. The PRD requirement right now is for 8-foot side yard setbacks, and I guess the discussion is to move those to a 5-foot setback. And I wanted to make sure that from our perspective that was understood as to the impact of what that would be. The plat that we are bringing back to the council for our project off Bluff Road will be under 5 units an acre. They're single family homes. But if you can imagine a site with a 30-foot building pad, if you can modify that to be a 5-foot setback instead of an 8, it doesn't sound like a lot of space, but it's enormous on its impact on that building lot. Because it would, that extra 6 feet or 3 feet on each side transitions in the depth of a lot of 100 feet. After you've taken the front and the rear setbacks out, you've got about a 60-foot building pad. So 6 feet times 60 is 360 square feet of living area that can be added to the main floor of a residence. So the city, without any increase in density, gets a larger, nicer home, more diversity in the layouts of, that's the builder that we're working with is waiting for me to call him tomorrow morning and tell him if that has been passed, because they'll immediately begin to design homes with main floor living space, master bedroom, master bath suite, without a change in zoning. We would not change anything about the platting of our property, but it would certainly make a difference in the quality of home and the variety. Ramblers become more practical, ranches become more practical because there's that extra space, and 360 feet in these little ramblers makes a big, big difference. So we would like to target to a 55 plus age bracket, and and that would really enable us to do that. So we wanted to go on the record as hoping that that would be passed, and wanted to know the impact if it was.
Thank you, Mr. Prince. Anyone else? Yes.
No, my name is Keith Warren. I live in Trailside as well, 1778 West. And for the sake of time here, when we talked about this in the planning commission meeting, about the zoning for the area east of us, we had over 35 minutes worth of comments. And my guess is no one here has had a chance to read the minutes of those meetings. And obviously I can't give 35 minutes worth of comments now. But before you vote on something, I wish you would read those comments. And they might change your mind on what you're thinking about doing. One other thing I'd like to add on to that is if you've driven the new bridge from Coles that goes over 15, that becomes Angel and cuts through, it used to be a residential neighborhood. Our street stubs into where this new development is going to be. The West Davis corridor, if you're going to go there from this new development, you're going to come down right down my street. We can't handle that type of traffic in Trailside. You've got 117 older people living there. It doesn't work. So it would be good, I think, if you could look at those planning commission minutes, see what was said at that meeting before you vote on whether or not you're going to increase the density, which they voted against at the planning commission meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Barbara Nichols, 2843 Trailside Drive. I would wish that you would do PRDs where it makes sense. By the business districts, by bus stops, by people who live in high density, only have one car. The rest of the residents are dependent on mass transit. The nearest bus stop to that is 1.5 miles. That doesn't make sense. It just defeats the purpose of high density housing. Somehow I feel that somebody's pushing this through because, as you've noticed, the planning commission already rejected the rezoning. But yet here it is on the agenda. I guess you just want a rubber stamp commission to go ahead and do things that you really want to do anyway. But developers come in, they make big promises, they do their thing with the least amount of possible money, then the surrounding property owners are left holding the bag with increased traffic, increased crime, increased poverty, abandonment of property. And if you don't believe that is true, look at Stillwater, where all those high densities housing, they're already abandoning properties down there. I wish that you would, they rejected the thing because of two things. Basically the safety of Bluff. That little cow path is paved, but it's not meant to be a entry, whatever you call it. It's not meant to be a thoroughfare. It's just a little cow path, and it only does 2 lanes during school opening times and during commuting time. It's bordered, it's bumper to bumper. It's not going to handle anymore. They did it because of the traffic on Bluff. They were going to do a study for Bluff, and then they also because the developer did not show anything, not one plan that he was going to plan on doing. All he said was that he wanted it increased to the acres, and then he would come up with something to build. He wouldn't even give us the courtesy of telling us what he was going to build. There's such a big rush to develop this property by Legacy, but look at the old Legacy. There's still backyards when you go down there. They haven't done any business developments next to the Legacy. All the business districts are already claimed. They're already there and established. They're not going to be moving near Legacy. It's controlled on-off, so they can't get off there. They have to go to the control, and so the controls are where the business is. R.C. Willey wanted a high prominence on Legacy. They didn't get that, so they're leaving. But there is no other business proposition close to Legacy, and there isn't in the old one either. And it's been sitting there since 2008. If you want high density so bad, put it where it needs to be. There's all that land opposite of the animal, hospital. All that land is free, right there on Antelope, that's where it makes sense. There's a big lot behind Smith's, that's where it makes sense. When you cross the street and down half a block and you're in the bus stop,
Ma'am, I'll give you 30 more seconds for overtime.
okay? We just want the residents to be heard, and we want what to be built, something that we appreciate and can make a value to our property, maintain our property levels, and make our city better, because we love Syracuse. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
My name is Dean Gillum. I live in Trailside at 313 South, 1765 West, and I would just admonish the commission to consider wetlands in your deliberations on how you're going to develop Syracuse, particularly the area east of Trailside, case in point. Wetlands are a sponge. They absorb up to 1 million gallons of water per acre. That's flood control that we don't have to worry about right now because the wetlands are taken care of. If we're going to develop the wetlands, then who's going to handle that water? Is the developer going to track that water around the development, drain it off? Is the city going to do it? Everybody going to pay? I don't know, but you need to consider the redirection of that water that is being housed now by the wetlands. Number two, if you're considering increased density for the PRD designation from say 6 to 12 units per acre, that's a new step on the part of Syracuse historically. I can't tell you whether to do it or not to do it, but I can tell you, don't screw it up if you decide to do it. Because it'll be the first time, you'll be the first council to have ever done it. So, one good way of screwing it up is to build it on wetlands. Increase your densities, and then let a developer come in and put that density on top of a wetland. There's a lot of non-wetland areas you can experiment with, not east of Trailside. So, the point there is, if you're going to do it, prepare for cracked foundations and leaking basements, because that's what always happens when you develop on a wetland. You can look in the literature and find that for yourself. So if you've got non-redirection of water, or payment for that by the developer or the city, and you have the foundation issues and the flooding issues, is that what you want to have in your first foray into high-density development? I say no. Thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing and seeing none, I'll close public comment.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
considering so many people have come to comment on this item, and it's so late in the agenda, I would request that we move J6 to the next item so that they can be here to hear our response to that while they're here, and they can.
J4?
Yes, and 4.
Council, have consensus with that?
I would like that as well.
I would too.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Let's move to J4 first. Okay, and we've got 10 minutes. Marissa?
While they're doing that, as a point of clarification, I know that it was mentioned that this is the first time city council's ever done townhomes. Previous in the city, it was actually, I don't remember if it was 11 or 12 a few years back, so this is not the first time, and there actually are multiple townhomes throughout the city. So, that were developed under that ordinance. So I'm not saying for or against, I'm just wanting to clarify that point, that that was not the case.
Okay. Is no one here?
We're just tracking in. I think he was waiting for later in the agenda. He's just down the hall, stealing it.
Finishing his pizza.
Maybe so, trying to choke
Why
down
don't-
his dinner.
let's back up to, let's discuss the museum foundation board, and then we'll come back down to this one. Is that all right?
Yep.
Then,
He's here.
Noah, you back?
Hey guys, sorry.
Sorry.
Good
Didn't
timing.
realize you moved it up in the agenda. I'm happy to talk to it though.
Okay.
We thought it expeditious to forward.
Do you
Sure.
have the big screen?
I do. Is that a possibility?
Yeah.
One second, sorry guys.
And maybe I can clarify something really quick too, while he's working on this. The last meeting we had, we actually put this back, set it aside again to make sure that we didn't do more than 6 per 6 units per acre in your area. So our last meeting 2 weeks ago was stopped so that we could make sure that we had written and rewrote the words that would clarify so that we aren't in 9 or 12 units at one side. Because we understand, and I actually did read all of the minutes and all of the comments. And know exactly what you're saying, which
We
is
are
why
advised of those minutes before
Yeah.
this meeting.
Appreciate you taking time to do
Yes.
that.
I'd like to think we're pretty thorough.
Yes, yes, she does very thorough.
Council, we've got about,
We're ready?
30 minutes to
Ready.
solve 2 issues. Let's keep our discussion to the table.
So J4 is a rezone from A1 R2 to professional office. This is located on 2000 West, south of Linquist, or south of IUC, and Linquist is the
What are
applicant.
we doing now?
This is a,
J4.
yeah, I don't know why we're
I
doing
think we
this one.
wanted.
We
jump
wanted
on
to
to-
J4 was
This is
agricultural.
across
told
from
J4
that.
we were.
He was told
You want-
J4.
you wanna do
I
cross
think, yeah, I
over?
think we're doing J6.
J5 and 6.
5 and 6.
We had approved after
Okay.
J4, so it's not his.
Do you guys want to do 6 or 5
J4 on the
first?
agenda, I don't think is the same.
I think things are messed up.
Oh, yeah, we don't want to do
Just in the agenda.
We're 6.
Yeah, so we have Linquist rezone, we have PRD ordinance, and we have PRD general
We
plan.
want to do PRG ordinance and PRD general plan.
Yes.
Those are the items that we thought we were.
I thought we're 4 and 6.
I think we're on the same page now.
I just think there's a mix up in
The
this
numbers.
packet.
Oh, 'cause yeah, the
The
agenda
agenda.
here,
Oh.
yeah, they adjusted the agenda.
Yes.
All right. Okay, PRD ordinance. We've had much discussion on the topic. Previously, it was on the voting session, but there was 2 kind of outstanding items that came up. 1, the side setback, and 2, the heights. And so I've taken your input and hopefully incorporated that into the ordinance. Of course, this is a starting point to help us get familiarized with, hopefully, hopefully I've met the comments. So if we go to page, sorry, let me find where I'm trying to go here. I'm trying to go to the side setback. Here we go. Page 4 of the PRD under F. Okay, so there was a concern expressed about 3-story structures being really close together.
Yep.
Right, so I
Can we
was.
back up, Noah? We are, if we go to item A, density, I just want to clarify one point because of the change in language. At this time, Bluff is considered a what kind of road?
Bluff is a collector road currently.
Is a collector.
Yes.
But as soon as it becomes dead end because of the change in the highway, it will not be a collector. It will be a.
It says that we will rely on the adopted transportation master plan. So if they study it and it gets downgraded, then the qualification for those units, and you would.
My concern is.
I think on the master plan, it's a minor collector.
Yeah,
Minor arterial.
That's what I'm concerned about. So, because we know that now, and yet these developments will happen before that change to that road happens, and yet we know it's happening. I want to know that there's some, I'm concerned, Paul, legally, that somebody's gonna claim that this is a higher trafficked road and try to put higher density on that, something that feeds that road.
So,
How do we handle that?
So, are we talking about the ordinance that applies to the whole city, or are we talking about?
Yes, the ordinance applies to the whole city,
Okay.
but
So if a road
I don't
says
want
maybe-
somebody to find exemption in, a status that's gonna be here for less than a year.
True. So,
Yeah, we're relying
whatever
on
the
the
ordinance
future
defines it as, so the ordinance says we look at the master plan, then the master plan in effect, when they make their application for the zone change, would be what is applied. So if you don't want that to be the case, then you need to find another criteria for the
Okay.
units.
Or we just update we need to make an amendment to the master plan to
No,
downgrade.
because they've already applied.
And here on number 2, though, is what an arterial is.
well,
Number
this-
one.
let me
we're
make a
not-
clarification here. So, in under 4, it says road classifications are identified in the adopted transportation master plan's existing street network. Previously, it said proposed street network. So currently, Bluff Road is a collector road. It is not an arterial road.
Okay.
Okay, so
I think that
this
answers
could
your
not
question.
apply to
In
the
the
9-unit density.
So currently,
Okay.
the density is 6 units per acre.
I'm just concerned about Bluff, because we know that road changes.
I
So
understand.
if that's the case, that legally, and I just want to confirm that legally, this cannot be considered the second level, then I'm fine.
But I don't know if
Or
you guys
can
wanna-
it be?
Conversation about the future. As long as the transportation master plan says, the current plan shows that it's a collector, then it's a collector. I don't know how you could argue it's not a collector.
But we also all know that that collector status is going to go away.
Well, the projected
know.
traffic volume is going
Because
down.
of West Davis corridor and being on the other side, though.
There you are. I thought,
It could be
I was
a
like looking for
different
you over here.
definition as well, because that would be on the opposite, also
I don't know if you
bordering
wanna
city
comment
land.
about that.
And there will be a connection there with an on-off ramp.
But on the other side.
Yes, but it's still adjacent to this property.
Fair.
Okay,
Okay.
point resolved, thank you.
You're welcome.
Carry on.
Carry on.
Or
Okay.
whatever it's on.
So we now go
Good
down to the
song.
height restriction.
Yeah, can we go down to the height restriction? So it
Is
says,
the- wait a minute.
so we're on page 4,
Keep there from being 3
under F.
stories.
Under F, yeah.
Well, we allow 3-story, if we're allowing them to expand out or up, but not at the same time.
Basically, if they go, so it says, it would say, if the height of the structure exceeds 2 stories, then the minimum side yard shall then be 16 feet. So it'd revert back to what it was before if it's taller. But a note, as far as side yards are concerned, the skinnier that you squish a lot, the more likelier it is to go
up.
So like when we relax the side setback standards, you have a higher probability that these will be single-story homes.
So
It's the same
I want to
density
be
on that.
clear here that
Sure.
I think 5 is too small, and one of the reasons that I think 5 is too small is,
5 foot.
well, 5
Oh,
foot.
side yard.
This is side
5
yards.
foot side yards is too small because your average car exceeds 6 feet. So that means that if you were to traverse the side of your house to get to the back for loading, unloading, anything out of the ordinary, you now are sharing your neighbor's yard to do that. Now, what if we have disputes that people say, you're not using your property to do this, you've now damaged my property because you've exceeded that boundary? Or what if somebody tries to park something on the side of their home, whether we allow it or not, they're now not on their own property. So I think that we can't go below the width of a vehicle. How would we do that?
I can see your point, but I also do think that a Rambler is better for 55 plus type of homes, and also it's going to be the same density no matter what.
See, I'm
So
not
if you-
only-
That doesn't have anything to do with car size.
I understand your point on the car size, but I don't see us putting extra parking on the sides of these homes because the lots are so small. Why would you just have cement throughout? You'd have to apply for that in hard surface area for water coming off of the roof and everything, and obviously that's not gonna work very well. So I don't see that being a problem for this area.
People right now try to put trailers, try to put a utility vehicle, something on the side of their yard, and they would now exceed their property yard.
According to Google, the average full-size pickup bed is designed to fit a 4-foot wide sheet of material between the wheel wells. So,
Okay, that's
that's
4 feet inside.
yes. So I'm saying, so 6 feet is, so if we are trying to allocate for a car, I just have to validate what
Okay,
you're saying.
thank you.
If we're making that as something we want to be able to do is have enough room that you can put a car on the side of the house, and you would at least have to do 6 feet.
So I get that, but I'm not sure I can picture that this type of a neighborhood, it needs that.
Well, remember that these are.
It's a planned residential development, so it's going to be planned according
You
to, you're not gonna be like being
I don't want to
arbitrary with
discount the option.
extra pads. Usually you're gonna have an
People
HOA
will
governing
do
these
this.
things.
We have no control over what the HOA says.
Right, but I'm
The
saying
HOA
that.
could vote to allow these, and then there's not enough room for them.
Well, then they'll have to take care of the disputes that occur if there is any. I'm
Like,
just saying.
that's poor planning on our part to allow that dispute.
Yeah, you guys are accurate in, a 5-foot setback won't allow
Won't
a car
allow
to
a
be
car.
parked. And the reason why 10 was chosen is because it's currently being done in another zone, the RPC zone,
Right.
nearby, and so that's, but they
Different
don't
zone,
allow.
different requirements.
Yeah, they can't fit a car, so it's something you guys will have to decide is how important it is to have, be able to park a car.
And here's another thought with that, if you don't want that problem, you make it 5,
smaller.
and there are gonna be the parking on the side, and they'll have to park their trailer in a rented space someplace else.
Like a drive lane on a street is anywhere, the faster the speed limit, the higher it is. So like a normal drive lane is like 11 feet usually. The car's like, or 12, yeah. So a car's usually 8 or 9 feet wide, or even less, probably 7 or 8 feet wide. So even an 8-foot, a lot of times it's pretty tight too. But depends on how they lay it out on the site and stuff. But if it just depends on if that's a priority of being able to park them,
The thing is, even 8 feet isn't, you're not gonna get a car there because,
No.
let's say you set it to 8 feet, you still can't open the doors. But
Exactly.
a foot and a half, and
yeah, I
so,
think
so
the
I don't
purpose
think
here
that
is to-
even setting it to, leaving it at the 8 isn't gonna resolve the car issue, because you have to be able to open the car doors and actually put things in the car.
So
Council,
really
to
the
give you
issue's
the economy
moved.
of time, we're halfway through our allotted time with this.
I think my bigger concern is height, which
Yeah.
is why we talked about this last week and shelved it again, because we don't want to end up with a bunch of tall buildings by Jensen and by Trailside. We wanted to make sure that there were stipulations in place to keep the bare minimum PRD and the bare minimum of height, so that we don't.
I'm trying to remember, we did change it such that the taller ones are only allowed in the.
On the third, or on,
Only on
we're
the-
going.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Just
if you
wanna-
go to
I
page
thought that's what I
5,
saw.
you go to
have to
page
have
5
the
on the
8
top.
The
feet.
2-story
That was-
is
That's right.
fine,
Yeah.
if we wanna go
So-
with the 30-foot.
So we were trying to keep it at 2-story, just to make sure
Yes.
that there isn't a question for the future.
Yep.
Yep.
That they're sticking with 2-story,
That's fine.
and I think that in order to get a higher standard, a larger home, that makes a difference for people who want to stay there. If they feel like they're compelled to leave because they don't have the space inside, that's more of a deterrent in my
I'm actually
mind.
okay with the changes as they're written. That we-
There's no guarantee that people will actually build a bigger home because we gave them 3 extra feet. They could still build a smaller home.
Sure,
But they can only have so much.
but that sounds like
I
that's what
know.
you want anyway.
So, and Lisa's
No,
statement actually solidified this for me, cause I was going back and forth here, but the way you said bare minimum just made me realize they don't have to build it this way. If somebody wants a neighborhood with RV stores on the side of their house, they can build 30 feet on the side, but setting a minimum with the height regulations, the way it's worded here, I'm comfortable with.
As am I. I actually thought that was a good change. I'm glad we caught it. I do think it'll improve the product. I personally don't like small lots, but I've talked to enough people that there are generation, both the younger and the older, that don't want huge yards. Like I want 1/3 of an acre, I'm not happy. but not everyone's like that. And so this kind of spreads it out so that there's different, it caters to the various types of people. But we do want, I do like that we added in the general improvements so that it creates a higher end product, hopefully one that doesn't end up with the abandonment issues. So with the changes we've made, I'm good with this as is, with the updates. And I feel like it does protect the neighbors as well.
I feel like it's a text trail side, it's generally trail side. You're allowed about the same amount of units per acre. And if they're a little smaller, you end up with a little bit more yard than you would have otherwise. And I think it doesn't encroach on the existing community. It won't bring any more than another community, or an extension of your community is basically what it is.
Now remember, this ordinance is not being written for just one property.
Agreed.
This has to go throughout the
Which
whole
is why
city.
we wanted to make sure that we had these things
Which is
stipulated
why I'm
before
concerned
anything
about
happens.
Not just a 5 foot.
We can't vote on this
that's
today,
right.
cause this
Yeah,
is
we're not
a
voting.
business meeting, but what I would do is take some direction from the council, whether this ought to go to a consent agenda, or do you wanna discuss it again?
No, it's not consent. I'm not gonna consent to this.
All right, let's place this on the agenda for our business meeting in April, okay? Now, in your packet, there is a packet item number 6 under J. It is, if you're looking at we've had some items drop from the agenda, and that's why we're 2 off. But if you go to, in the packet, item 6, petition to amend general plan map for property located approximately 2900 South Bluff Road, agricultural A1, to planned residential development. And we've got 10 minutes for this one. You wanna shoot us with that one, Noah?
That's the one. So the applicant is here, Mr. Bastian's here. He's applied to amend the general plan to PRD. Here you have a map, you can see the property boundaries there. This would be within 6 units per acre. And remember we've had discussion about this last time. He's came back and provided a concept map to hopefully address some of the concerns that were brought up. But the PRD zone as we know it allows 6 units per acre, requires open space and a development agreement, and it's surrounded by.
Procedurally, I'm really concerned that 2 work sessions ago, we had taken a straw poll and agreed that this would probably get voted down, and then it didn't show up on the agenda. But now we're rehashing this again, because what, is no not an acceptable answer?
I don't believe that there was a straw poll.
There was.
Well, if there were, it would be a straw, it was not a vote.
That's
So-
not the point. The point is that it didn't show up on the agenda for a vote after we had agreed that we were ready to move forward with it.
I think there was,
Yeah, the applicant requested to come off the agenda,
Yeah.
right?
So that means that no matter what we debate at this table, if they don't get the result they want, then they bring it back to this table until we consent.
and maybe that was under the other designation of the PRD at that time.
No, I think this
There might
is
be
on
other
the agenda
situations.
because the applicant requested to come and present a
But we've had this before, where we sit at this table in a work session, including when we've done it in the same meeting, where we'd have a work session prior to a voting session, and we said, okay, this is where we're resolved to go, we think we've discussed it, and then the applicant says, whoa, if you're gonna vote no, then we're gonna start over. And let's withdraw from the agenda and come back and try to hit this again until you're ready to vote my way.
Well, and that's okay if they made
It's
changes.
not okay.
If they made changes, then.
No,
I don't
I
believe
think
that there were.
what's precipitating the applicant's actions right now is we have changed the PR, where we were going with the PRD.
Right,
ordinance.
it's our changes, not his.
You know, his idea was of a higher density prior to what it looked like this council was gonna lower the density on the PRD, and so he has a different application essentially of what he wants to do based on your discussions. That's kind of the dynamic here, is he's reacting to what you're doing.
I think it makes it look like somebody else has an agenda that they're not willing to to allow the council to vote on when you do this. And I don't think it's a good policy to have. I think that if we come to a decision that if you're gonna change your mind, that's fine, we can table it and bring it off the agenda, but it should show up on the agenda. If we had the discussion and arrived at a voting standard, then it should show up.
He has the right to delay, to table his item.
So, and I get what you're saying, and I can see why it would appear that way. What
Appearances matter.
they do, and you're right. But I wanna make sure that, you know, and this is, I don't control the agenda, but what I would caution the council is that when you do vote on an item, you wanna make sure you're voting on current and accurate information. And if that were on the agenda and voted on at the last meeting, it would have been based on his presentation of what he wanted to do with this property, which is no longer what he wants to do with the property. So I just wanna make sure that you have, I would say, even though the appearances may look otherwise, the facts are that you should be making votes on current and accurate information.
And I'll take the heat for moving this because it was apparent to me that the density he was seeking was not going to be authorized by this council. But you authorized a different density there and he's come back with a whole different product and that's why it's back here on the table.
Okay, so.
And I feel that he should have a right to do that, to come back with something now that's met your approval.
So I'm gonna go a little different way with this anyway. I think that this property is an essential vital link to the future of this city, and I do not think that we should switch it from agriculture to any residential at this point. It is agriculture.
Actually, R1.
You know, it
General
is
plan.
A1.
It's
It
A1.
is A1. It is agricultural land.
Now, you do realize that with doing that, with
Currently
West Davis Quarter
R1.
coming through on the other side,
Zone
adjacent to this property, you are leaving it open
it's
to
a
being
general plan.
zoned at
General
higher
plan is
density
R1.
because it will be adjacent to a major arterial.
I'm actually really concerned about that very thing with the West
So-
Davis corridor because we have one of our largest retailers sitting exactly north of this property. And if they feel, after they dead-end bluff, that they need some kind of access back towards a main.
That's a major what if, Dave, because I don't see that happening.
Well,
I really don't.
it
You're
is
talking
possible.
about a major what if. We're talking about an actual application
And
for
you're
a
gonna
lower density.
cut off any possibility that we can serve that major retailer because there's no other option.
I
if we do
cannot
this.
see them negotiating for keeping open property just for their signage, I'm sorry.
It's not for signage, it's to keep their business open.
One way or another, that is a huge what if, and there's no way that's going to be happening.
There's no way what's gonna be happening, that they're gonna stay open?
No, that you're going to keep it just agricultural for a business.
No, I want to finish the general plan, and when we finish the general plan, do the traffic consideration. And if we need a road that crosses this property, we should consider that first. Because we just approved the property to the south to be homes, everything all the way down to where the highway is gonna be is homes.
Where at would this road cross through this property, Dave?
Right down the middle, that's the concern.
I'm going to ask for a suspension of this debate and ask the applicant to come up and show us what the new project looks like.
Thanks.
I don't see it.
So just to clarify this on the large retailer, I bought the ground from them and I've talked to the CEO and they are relocating up to Layton. They're relocating.
I talked to the CEO, and that is not accurate.
Okay, yeah, I bought the ground from them. I've talked to them and that's what they told me. They sold the ground to me. So I don't want to get into too much of a disgruntle here over it, but they sold the ground to me because they're done with it. They're talking about selling the other ground as well once they're done. So, but anyway, I'm happy tabling this item if it would make everybody feel better once the PRD zone's passed. But right now, how it's looking is this property
would lend to 6 units to the acre. So we went back to the drawing board because originally we were looking for a higher density. We were looking for like around 12. And that just wouldn't work. We realized with Trailside on the side of us, with what the developer on the south side of us is doing, it just wasn't going to work. So we went back to the drawing board and we took into consideration several things. We need open space. We need to preserve open space. In our meeting in the Planning Commission, there was concern about allowing some of we do have a little wetland right here, and that's a concern. And so we want to preserve that. Yeah, there's a wetland here. And so we're going to preserve this as a common area all the way up into here. And our actual common area is 29% is where our common area. So we exceed the minimum requirement in the PRD zone as it's written. We went back and we found some plans, and they're patio home, twin homes, which are individual ownership. And we propose that we only do those, well, they'll be throughout the community, but especially here where they back Trailside, because these are single-story homes. And so we're going to propose that these be patio home, twin homes here. And then we've got our townhomes up front with our twin homes mixed in the back here. And we feel like this is a community that would lend to not only your starter community, but your second-time home buyer, and also those that are looking to retire into a patio home that aren't able to do stairs anymore. So we're trying to make a community that appeals to everybody here in Syracuse, those that are here and those that might want to come here. So we feel like this has been a good compromise. Our density is actually less than 6. We're at about 5.6 or 7 on our density. We actually own over here like this. So we actually will be deeding to the city about an acre and a half. So this is all cleaned up here with the trail and Bluff Road. Because right now we own, over onto Bluff Road. But
Mike,
yeah.
I'm going to ask that we suspend and table this if you're okay.
I'm okay with it, yeah.
Because we've met our time allotment. But I think what might be valuable would be if you could step out maybe into the hallway and maybe entertain questions from the residents.
I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, guys.
If you have questions for him, I'd invite you to step out and ask those questions. All right, council, let's go back to item number C, discussion on the museum board. Brody, are you leading us into this one?
Sure. There's you've seen the memo in the packet. What we want to accomplish with this discussion is get an understanding from the museum board some of the issues that they're facing and discuss some of the
Okay, do you guys have a copy of this already?
I'm just passing those.
No, we just have to have it on the record though. I'm just making sure that we have it.
So, Dean, you can come on up. Dean, you can go up front or sit right here, whichever makes you comfortable. He is the president of the Museum Foundation, and he is going to explain some of the issues that they're facing.
Thank you, Brody. Yes, I have been volunteered to be the president, but make no mistake, Phil Gooch is in charge. But I've been associated with the museum for a little over a year. We are accredited with the Utah State Museum and Arts Council. They have been out and visited our museum, and the comments back from them, for a small museum, they're very, very surprised at the quality of the items that we have inside the museum, and also the ability to display them in a very good, professional, easy manner. The problems we're starting to face with the museum is when it was put together, it was wonderful, and the products we have there have come from kind of the whole area. It's not just Syracuse, but it's really everything from Hooper to Kaysville, and we call it Syracuse. And I live in Clinton. but the situation we're facing now is, you know, I'm old, and I'm probably about the youngest person there.
No, can't close it.
And so, with that said, we have probably 12 to 14 volunteers that come once a week for 3 hours at a time. And as they're getting older, they're losing their enthusiasm, they're not able to do the things they need to do. We come up with things that happen, like I usually come on Tuesdays, but I end up coming Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday now. And we need some consistency in there so that when we start a project on Tuesday, it's followed through clear till Thursday. And so we are proposing that, and I guess it used to be that we had a part-time person from the city that would come over there and help us and give us some consistency for the museum to keep things going, the projects that we start. It'd almost be like a manager that answer to the foundation. But so we were proposing to have kind of a part-time person, a part-time employee from the city, and I think the city's done that in the past to help us. The other problem we've got is we look at our driver's licenses and we're not real good on the computers, so we need someone there to help us out and do that. And with that said, software on the computers, the original software that was put in there was put in when the museum was first put in. And believe me, I'm no good on a computer, but this stuff's really tough. And so we need an upgrade on the software, and then we need somebody to kind of host it for us on a regular basis.
What kind of software do you use?
We currently have Past Perfect, and we need to go up to the current version of 4.0. But the one we've got, as we look at all of the products that we have out there and trying to get them identified, that's part of the thing we have now, is identifying everything, making sure it's on the computer, on there correctly, who did it, a little bit of history about it. I might as well write it down with my pencil and paper. It's not very good. Some of it's very good, some of it isn't. We're trying to do an assessment list, finding everything, getting it on the computer, and we need someone to help us with that. I've gone so far to get hold of, we visited Brigham City and the museum, and ours is much better than theirs. We visited Layton, ours is much better. We have a beautiful, beautiful museum. You can ask the people from the state, they'll tell you that. But they have interns that come down from Utah State and help them with some of these computer items. I've talked to Weber State, they said that's where we need to go. And we're kind of in between semesters, quarters, so I think we can get some intern help to come in and help get all of these things on the computer. So I guess what we're asking for is we need software update, we need someone to host it, and we need some part-time help from the city, hopefully, to help us with this. The thing I'm afraid of is when I finish my volunteer presidency, I don't know, we just don't have any succession plan there. I hate to see these things get lost. Everything there is so fantastic, so neat, so beautiful, so well done. Every time I go there, I learn something that I've never thought of before. And yes, I do have some roots in Syracuse. The hills, my grandparents owned a lot of the property east of where the museum is at the time. My dad's from Syracuse, but I'm from Clinton.
So when you talk about city staff support,
yes,
are you thinking somebody that has an office in the museum, or somebody over here that can provide support?
Somebody here that can come over 3 days a week and help us out for 3 hours. So we're looking at 9 hours a week to come and help support it. We have a lot of tours after hours, but we take care of that. We can handle that, the staffing. We just need to be elevated. We need some younger blood in there. We just don't want to wake up one day and there's nobody left there. I think the average age is 83. You know, it's kind of scary.
So what are your actual hours of operation then?
Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 2 until 5. And as far as museum traffic, we average over 2,000 people per year, which is not a lot, but when you only look at the hours we've got, it is quite a bit. And we're upgrading things, we're making it very hands-on. The kids come in there now, they can touch and feel and look at things. It isn't, don't touch it, don't look at it, don't say anything. It's a very hands-on operated museum, and as we visit other museums, we're trying to find the best things we can find from all of them and make that available in our museum. And so if you want to really see something fun and interesting, it's completely different now than it was a year ago.
Wow.
How have we priced the software update?
I
can't
can tell you,
imagine
the
it.
software
That would be
update's
great.
$500, and to have the web hosted is $700 annually.
Now, Brody, with the changes of what we're doing, in hosting things, can we get a better price for just piggybacking on the stuff the city is gonna move to cloud?
It depends on if the software, requires it to host with their it's a web-based software, so I don't know if it's gonna be, they're gonna require that they host it. If it's just hosting it through like our OneDrive system, it would be, we could do that probably for free depending on the size.
Yeah, I'd like to look into how much we could do, because all of our computer systems are currently something that we're trying to consolidate, update, and so I have no problem paying for the software update, the physical one-time cost.
Yeah.
I just would like to factor in any savings that we may be able to help out with on the continual end. And I get it, there's gonna be continual cost, we need to look at that, and we need to look at all city functions as a big picture, not at little individual pictures, because it's a big savings.
But the other thing I want to understand is you said for them to host $700 a year. What do you get for that you don't get with the software?
Good question.
My guess is the $700 a year is the annual maintenance fee for the software.
That's correct. And to make sure, right now, if something goes down,
So
we are
that's
lost. We've lost everything. They host it, so they've got control of it, so nothing
So
is ever.
it's not a data storage, it's a actual.
It's a cloud-based.
Cloud-based service.
Yes, yes.
Okay, that makes.
And maybe
sense.
there's better ways to do it.
700 a year seems a little steep.
It did.
Considering the initial was 500,
This is
yeah.
just what we did on our initial research, just to throw some numbers. If we can get it
Sure.
cheaper, then I've oversold and you, but, so we've done a good job there. But we do need help with software, and we do need help with someone to help with consistency, just because of the nature of the beast and the people that work there, the volunteers. We need some consistency.
So I'd like to have a deeper discussion on the museum, because I think, it's something that's done so well in our city. Maybe as part of finding some staff, we might find some interest in expansion, or in making it even more.
I would love to see if we can, along those same lines. I confess I've never been there, simply because it's open Tuesday to Thursday and closes at 5, and I get home at 5:20-ish.
And like we mentioned on the flyers we pass all around town,
Yeah.
if you need a private showing, we're more than happy to come.
Yes.
Bring your kids and they'll have a ball. And
Council, I'm the liaison with the museum. Are there two of you that would work with me and would maybe meet with them and see what their needs are, and maybe come back with a recommendation?
I'd be
Lisa,
happy
you would
to.
too?
I would.
Dave, you would?
If Doug wants it, it's fine. I'm interested, I just can't do mornings. They always meet at 9 a.m. on Tuesdays. And
Yeah, I'd be interested as well, but I assume they're going to want to do it during business hours.
I can't do mornings.
Well, Dean, you may have to adjust your schedule a little bit.
But it sounds like you have two people that are probably very flexible, so.
I'm old, I got nothing else to do.
But thank you for all you do.
And thank you.
One comment on the museum, just clarification. The museum is owned by a foundation. And so all of the items inside the museum are part of the Syracuse Museum Foundation. The city owns the buildings that house the museum, but the foundation owns the items.
That may be.
Since they own the building, I think that we shouldn't have a problem with the software situation still, because it's not the items that we're.
But it is the city, it is the biggest treasure. Like when we went to Brigham City, I was amazed. They says, our museum is the second biggest tourist attraction in the whole county of Box Elder County. And I said, well, what's first? Well, the bird refuge. And we're second. Their museum is terrible.
So, always should be aware that you're on the record.
But this museum is I just kind of volunteered for something to do, but it's kind of catchy. It is fabulous.
I would like to discuss as a council ways that we can increase support for the museum, but I guess it seems like we have maybe a deeper discussion than what we're scheduled for tonight.
Let's do that, and then we'll get together and
Thank you.
we'll sit down. And
Thanks so much for all your time. We do appreciate you.
Thank you.
I love the intern idea.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I think
Okay,
that'd be so
council,
good.
we're at item D, discussion of the Parks Advisory Committee of Syracuse Code 3135 relating to Parks Advisory Committee. 20 minutes on that one.
Yes, this was a request by council to put on the agenda to review the Park Advisory Committee ordinance. Not exactly sure where you wanted to go with it, but attached in the packet is the ordinance.
My concern, first and foremost, was that this was set aside to be a advisory board, and I feel like on this subject there seems to be a divided council, but the representation all comes from one half of the division and none from the other, and that's concerning to me.
So, I don't mean to be rude, Dave, I'm just gonna be frank. You wanna be on the
No,
committee.
that's not
what
it.
it's about.
No, not necessarily. I'd be okay if Jordan was on it, and he also is interested. But I do feel like there seems to be a real debate when it comes to these issues, two very different schools of thought, and we have aligned. Lisa's new, so I don't know where she's gonna fall here, but we have seemed to fall on the same side all the time, and you and Corinne fall on the same side. So if you guys are the only ones that show up at the meeting, and then you come back and say this is what happened, the other side of the table, for thought-wise, wasn't even considered.
You're gonna have to explain to me, because give me an example of a issue where we've split on that in the parks area.
Well, the first and foremost is gonna be the Parks Master Plan. Parks Master Plan, you had a very different approach and were very defensive of the way the approach was taken. We had a very different approach, and I feel like had that at least been represented on the committee, to the committee, there would have been a healthy discussion about it before it came back.
Okay.
I think that there is definitely some strong feelings about this last go around, more about the discussion than actually the substance. So I would think that you
I don't know what you mean by that.
What I'm talking about is the Parks Master Plan. So I would say that there was more of a, definitely a drawing of the lines, but at the same time, the substance of it actually did come through, and we've all, at least as far as the other end of the table, has been able to work through it. I don't see why there's a hang-up about the committee itself. Because there was a lack of direction basically at the very beginning with the master plan in the first place. And maybe to your point about what you wanted wasn't necessarily given at the beginning, but the focus was well thought through and the product of what was done was really good, and you accepted that. It was the portion that was not reviewed that you did not like. So that's where I'm confused on. As far as going through the actual text portion, the committee didn't actually go through much of the text at all. We were focused on looking at the numbers. We were looking at the actual substance of it and what was going to be the amounts designated for parks, the percentages needed, the certain level of service that we were going to want, and where those parks needed to be located. That was what our focus was, so that then the text could follow. So I just don't understand where the hang-up is about the committee. They are wonderful, nice people. They do not have a subversive agenda.
I haven't said anything about those people, and I'm kind of offended that you would suggest that I have.
Well, I'm just trying to establish the fact that we're not trying to misrepresent their work in any sort of way. and everything that they brought to you, that they actually have done, has been accepted and good.
Jordan.
So I actually want to discuss this from probably a different viewpoint. The only, and I actually would like to be on this, but not necessarily right now. The way we wrote this is it's staggered terms, 2 years, and so the way that plays out, since we have to do staggered, one of us is going to be on it for essentially 4 years. Is that what the plan is? Because we can't stagger it because everyone's starting at the same time.
When the members of the council were appointed by resolution, it doesn't say the terms of the council members on here.
Right.
But the resolution that was adopted, the council appointed them to be concurrent with their terms.
So what I would like.
We have never done that with anything else.
I agree, and I mean, other than other external boards.
So let me finish with where I was going with that. I never actually got to the point. I apologize. So the only thing that shame on me for missing this before. I actually would like to make this a year-to-year appointment. In that maybe like now, we don't change responsibilities every single time, but we have the option to. If I really want to be on the Parks Committee, I would like to be able to say, hey, this is something I have an interest in, and we can say, yes, right now, we're locked in. There will be no changes for the next, until the 2 that are on there are either out of office or run again and apply for it again. My only change that I'd like to do on this is I would like to make it a year-to-year. Let's not worry about the staggered terms. If we can stagger the terms if we want. That's the only recommendation I have is I'm going to make this a year-to-year appointment, and if someone wants to be on it, we have that liberty. If we want to adjust it or keep them on there, we have that freedom as well. That's my only change because, like I said, and maybe this is purely selfish, I would like to serve time on this committee at some point.
Is there a reason that it was set up different than all the rest?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Any different than all of the rest of the committees that we have.
And I missed that part.
And all I can say to Jordan's point is that I don't have a problem with having it year to year. I just do not agree with the lines being drawn as though that there's some sort of problem with who's on there already.
I agree with that.
Okay,
So I don't remember if this was the discussion or not, but I know that there was some concern with the terms being 2 years for the other members. And staggering 2 years is kind of awkward. Usually it's like at least 3, so you're not having 50% turnover every year, possibly. And so the 2 council members provided stability through those. The reason 2-year terms was contemplated and discussed was the fact that trying to get volunteers, a 2-year commitment, people can kind of more easily wrap their heads around than 4 years.
And I'm okay with the rest of the committee members being 2 years staggered, things like that. But as far as city council, I would like it to be year-to-year appointments where we can swap people in and out as we see fit. Maybe at one point or another, one of us is impassioned. I think Doug has a great background in the sports area. And so I think, if we're doing a sports park or something like that, I would like his expertise in the committee. If we're doing something else that I think Corinne or Lisa or myself, I would like to be able to swap people in as we need to see fit.
On purpose.
Dave, or Dave. Like Dave and I have worked on this task force for the splash pad. And I think that went really well. And we assigned people that were impassioned about projects, and I just want to not lose that flexibility. And especially as new members come on board, as new council members come on board, I don't want us to be like, sorry, they're on for the next 2 years. But we know that you have this amazing expertise in that, but you gotta wait.
Okay, let me address this because I don't want this to hang over our heads.
Okay.
First of all, I'm fine with that because we do that with all our committees.
I agree.
We can change it every year.
That would be a huge thing.
Not a big deal to me. But I want to make sure we're on the same page here, Dave. That this doesn't cloud our relationship as a council, because we've never been a council that has drawn lines on things. Do we debate and disagree on some things? Yeah, but we haven't drawn lines. But when you go into a committee, when any of us go into committee, we all tend to own that committee and defend it. You've done the same with the plans for 2 parks that you've been a part of. You've defended those, even though I don't like the pickleball courts, right? So when Lisa and I go in with the museum now, we're gonna be passionate about the museum. So I don't wanna characterize this as lines being drawn. And I think that's been shown as we've moved forward with further discussions on tightening up this document, that we've generally agreed it can become better.
That was my point to begin with.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. I agree that I think as a council we are unified. And that's why I say that this was, my pulling this back, of supporting the pullback of this, had absolutely no sway on who was on it. Simply that I wanted to make sure we had the opportunity to swap people in and out as we saw fit. I think we work great as a council together. This is a great council. I want to make sure it stays that way. But for this specific thing, I think it's easy to swap people on and off. If we feel like if we want to keep the stability as a council, we can do that by leaving someone on there. We don't have to codify leaving people on. We can just do it naturally. And I think that's kind of the way it works. Like, I've been on several of the committees I'm on for 2 years now, and it's not so much because someone else wanted it or not wanted it. It's just I like to think I was doing a good job, and you guys saw that. So so that's my only change, is I would like to try and make this a year-to-year appointment that we can manage just like the rest of them. This one's a little bit different because we are allowing them to be voting members, but I think that's just fine. I think that still fits within the realm of this. So that would be my recommendation, is to simply allow this to be a year-to-year appointment.
Lisa, can you express your opinion?
Yeah, I agree. I think that because we've said there wasn't any really specific reason as to why we needed to have it be a 4-year term or a full term. So I think along the lines of what Jordan said, if there's a reason to keep somebody on there, then we'll all have agreed with that. And if not, we'll switch it around as needs be and go along with what all the other committee liaisons are, which is year to year.
Like I said, eventually I would like to serve on this committee. I think it's a great committee. I think they're going to come up with some great ideas, and I'd like to be a part of it at some point in the future.
I'm fine with doing that like I did before.
Let me just make a quick comment from my position. The thing that was different about this is we were resurrecting an actual board. There was no board with the splash pad. There was no board with the regional park. There is a board that manages the museum. They're their own foundation. We probably will not have voting rights. There'll be no voting rights on this. We're there just as advisory, because the city has interest in the physical structure that's there. So this was a unique animal, and I think in terms of office, we kind of got confused with the folks that were coming in as the lay volunteers that were there and us as a council. So if you're happy with allowing free discussion of this every year, I'm good with that.
Yeah. Is there, so the next question is, when do you want that to begin?
Next year.
Yeah, I think
I think we need to change this year.
Jordan?
I'm okay either way. Like I said, I wouldn't mind being on the Parks Committee, but at the same time, I don't want to say that these two are not doing a great job. But so my reason is purely selfish, and I'll admit that openly.
Lisa?
I have no problem with waiting until next year, when all the other appointments are made.
With the legislative session being over, I feel much better about my time right now.
Yeah, that's another thing. I actually worry about Corinne, because she spends a ton of time away from her family between CERT and this, and I think she's on a lot of various committees. So maybe it's not as bad anymore, but anytime you need help, Corinne, let me know.
Doug?
I appreciate it.
I would propose waiting until we discuss everything else and start next year.
Seems like that's...
I mean, this was only started, what, in October?
And we haven't met this year yet.
So maybe what we could do is, in the meantime, let's get an amendment to the ordinance, so it specifies year to year for those council
Yes, please.
members. So we can get that ready probably for the April meeting.
And then leave
agenda.
the 2 year for the actual, the other civilian
Yes.
or residential.
Civilians.
That's a military terminology.
It's like your husband works for the military.
Yeah, something like that.
It seems like we have a majority that feel that way. Let's go to E, discussion on proposed amendments to disaster preparedness committee. Brody, are you presenting this one?
Sure. Yep. Okay, so as you saw in the memo, the disaster preparedness committee typically, but does not have to be made up of the 5 members of the committee actually are district leaders under our emergency management system. They're volunteer, so there's seven members on the board. 2 are at large. This is by choice of the mayor, not by ordinance. The other 5 are the district leaders under the community organization. In their operations, they've, from time to time, because of the membership and the careers of some of the members on the committee, they travel a lot. And a lot of them formally have assistant directors or assistant district leaders. And what they would like to do is, in their absence, they could have their assistant district leader vote on items in their public meetings on their behalf as a proxy. Under the proposed bylaws here, those assistant district leaders would have to be first ratified by the disaster preparedness committee before they could vote. So they have to be formally presented to the full committee, approved on a list, before they can come in and do a proxy vote for their appointed member. Yes.
So this is something I brought up when we presented this to the committee itself. So this is a little bit in breaking with a lot of our committees, and just so you guys are aware, that currently what we do is each of these district leaders, as they're assigned by their organizations, we bring them before the city council for approval, and that officially puts them on the board. So these district leaders would be in a different scenario where they would only require the approval of the committee itself.
For assistant district.
Assistant.
But they're not board members.
But they would be voting, so if the district leader is gone, they essentially fulfill that role and vote on his behalf.
So for consistency, then we probably would need to bring them before the council, because
What I was curious what your thoughts were on this.
only for consistency. Every time we have an actual board, we do this with, there are 2 or 3 boards in the city. Those members have to come before here, this group. It is just something we're doing, and I feel like we ought to be consistent. Hopefully, I don't expect it to be much more than really presenting of names. It also gives us a chance to kind of meet who these people are, in case we actually need to work with them in one of these situations. We'll have met them, we'll have seen them. So I don't expect it to be too formal, but that's what we do with every time there's an actual board.
Would that cause us to have to how often then would we have to ratify
we do it
names?
like once a year?
It would be regularly. I would, if
How
not,
regularly?
I would say every
couple
2
months.
months.
Oh, so we couldn't just
Really?
have all of them come in at once,
These-
once
Changing
a year?
columns.
Yeah, I mean, think of how often. So let now I'm gonna speak.
Okay.
I'm
We
gonna put
haven't
on my
had
other
that many
hat.
for the district leaders.
We've had probably about 3 a year.
That makes
Yeah.
sense because of they get different callings.
Yeah, because I mean,
Yeah.
just taking off that and just saying.
Yeah.
So district leader usually is synonymous in this area with the assigned leaders of the states.
Okay.
And so we ratify those people, but if anyone are familiar with the various states, there's a turnover
Sure.
due to different callings and things like that. And so this will be a regular agenda item that will double in frequency simply due to the fact that we're approving twice as many people.
So would it be possible to have our ordinance just say that we automatically ratify anybody that's called?
Or we
in
authorize
return?
the committee to do so.
Okay, but we don't even require, I mean, we've passed people all the time that don't necessarily come to this meeting. How tough is it for us to just treat this like everything else and just let it be a consent item on the agenda, or we just?
And it's probably not a big deal. I
That
just
they don't
wondered if
have
there
to
was an easier
physically
way.
be here?
No,
We
they don't have
don't,
to.
no.
That's
See,
good.
They
that's the
can
thing.
be, and that's nice, but they
You
don't
ask
have
them
to
to.
be.
But a regular opportunity, I think that might be a hard call for.
And maybe for
consistency.
assistance, we don't even ask them to come, but
We
for
always
me, the
invite
consistency
them.
of the way that we treat all like items is important.
Because we do the same thing for the Arts Council.
We
The
do.
Arts Council, they all come before us.
All come,
And
But
they-
that's
Who's their name?
A little bit
much
different.
less, right?
Turnover, much
They don't
less,
have the same
much
kind of
less.
turnover.
But
well, they have had,
Council,
they have had.
we need some direction over the time.
Yes.
Can I make one point real
Yes.
quick? So one difference between what is being proposed here is that it's a proxy vote, it's not
Right.
someone who's gonna vote differently than the person you appointed.
True.
Right.
Because
They have to represent the person.
yeah, they're representing the same area, so it's not a true voting member, it's a proxy vote.
And if the district leader is there, they do not get a vote. So that's the differentiation. So I could see it going both
If-
ways. I just wanna make sure you guys understand the
Yeah.
nuances.
Okay, well,
So-
with that to be in mind then, if they don't get a vote when the district's leader's there and we approve the district leader and then he picks somebody to proxy vote for him in the case he's not there, let's let the committee take care of that.
I agree. I think this amendment should be permitted and that we shouldn't make it any harder than it already is, especially with the turnover issue, with the proxy vote. It's not like somebody coming in and not already understanding what the vote should be. And it's not going to be that often that a proxy will be voted.
Dave? We're also recognizing these people when we do this. We recognize them as contributors, as volunteers in the city. You know, I don't think that it's a bad thing. I see it so little a part of our agenda. It'll be a 2-minute item. I don't have a problem with doing it, and I think that it offers consistency.
I'm actually agreeing with Dave on this. I think, like I said, we don't have to require them to come in, but I do think it offers a level of consistency as who's allowed to vote on committees, and sometimes it's just fun to see your name on an agenda.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of nice for them too, even if they're don't show up.
But it is.
It kind of does recognize
We are
them.
recognizing these people for their service.
So what if we just did that once a year? And they all came?
Okay.
I think we
I
make
bet-
it
I
a
think-
bigger deal than it would be otherwise, and maybe we can, I don't know.
I mean, and for some districts, you know, these proxy voters will never even go to a meeting.
Yeah.
Because their person always comes.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Okay.
It's just kind of nice
Like I
for
say,
them.
I think for us, it's not really an issue. It's just, I do like the idea of treating all the committees the same, and I do like the idea of putting these people's names out there saying,
Yeah.
hey, this is a contributor in our community, and we,
It becomes a part of our public record as well,
Yeah.
that we recognize them that way.
I don't mind the recognition that is.
but I don't feel like we need to grill them or interview them.
No, just mention their names.
Just mention their names
They are
Please
an
no,
I don't care.
we say same
Just
here,
your
that's
name.
okay.
I say the simpler the better,
Me too.
but for the argument of not, saying their names, I don't have a problem. It'll take 2 minutes.
Do we have enough
If that.
direction?
So, whatever comes out of Brody's
I'll
pen,
agree
I'm
with
okay.
Brody's got your
This is
I guess the
total-
question is, do you want on
No,
consent agenda or?
I think consent would be fine.
Yes.
Or,
Robert, discussion concerning installing crosswalks.
So with the construction of the island nearing completion and the library, it's,
Did everybody read the packet?
Yes.
Is anybody against this?
I actually have a change to it.
So-
Okay. I mean, I just don't wanna drag this out, I can't
Which
see this
number
as-
are we
yeah,
on?
I'm kind of making this
Crosswalk.
quick. I'm not asking you for approval to build,
Oh, never mind.
do traffic safety, because
Right.
that's,
Right.
under an engineer's purview. But I did put this together just to see what would the cost be and what
Sure.
would it take to actually build something. So So if this is something that you are interested in doing,
much needed.
it's just a budget item, that I would, if this is, so we're looking, what, 40,000, that we need to just add into a budget opening in the April meeting, so.
If we can do it, let's
And we
do
can
it.
probably do it with
Yeah.
surplus, that we
40,000.
save somewhere else.
So I looked at it on my phone and I was wrong, so I looked at it here and I'm actually okay with it as is. I do wanna commend, so, we talked, or commend Robert, we talked about this and originally we had a option that was much more expensive. Robert went out, did a whole bunch of homework, found this, I think this is a great compromise, and kudos to you for doing this.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
that's where my question lies. It's not the hawk signal that's
No,
up the road.
it's not, no.
The
So
Hawk was
in
almost 3
this-
times as much.
And I can totally get that,
This
but
would be-
how does this compare in,
Safety.
in safety and visual, you know, how it's visual to
I
self
see it
driving?
much like
This
we
is
have the school crossings.
exactly like what's up on 700 South at the high school. It's
Yeah.
the same exact setup. It's very visual. I've had a lot of people comment that they really love that. The width of the road
Or it's a
crossing,
2-lane.
it's
Yeah.
about the same
Yeah.
width, and I did take some just preliminary traffic data at both sites. The high school gets about 4,500 cars a day, and this site gets 11,000 cars a day. So it's more cars, but high school gets 89 pedestrians crossing the crosswalk in a peak hour right after school. This, I don't have any pedestrian counts because there's no crossing there anyway. So I'm certain that because there's a draw with the library and the splash pad, on top of everything else that's already creating the draw, that it'll be equal or more than the 89. So I really feel like
Well, I think it's
this is
even more
needed.
important because if by doing this, you give the opportunity for some of these kids to cross, with less traffic than cross at Antelope. Because a lot of them
Yes.
could walk from whichever side of the street they're on, come all the way down and then cross at a much safer place.
Right.
If this ever goes to a 4-lane road, we might wanna consider a Hawk.
Absolutely.
But under these circumstances, I think this was a great solution.
So just adding to the safety of this, do we currently have a crossing guard anywhere along there? It's just
At
at the,
Antelope.
just
Just
at
during,
Antelope.
during school
Just
hours at
Antelope.
Antelope, there is
Okay,
crossing.
so would the PD consider moving one to this location then, or adding one?
We would add one, but we'd have to see if
Yeah.
it's,
If it.
what the crossing
Yeah, I
is.
don't
But
know.
I see
I
this,
don't know.
I
Because
see
the
this
kids
more
won't cross
for
there.
other hours. I don't see this as just for the school hours. With that splash
This will be used
pad
heavily in the
feature
summer.
Yeah,
and
that's
the-
what we-
yeah, that's so.
There's no crossing guards
So this,
anywhere.
this isn't gonna be a designated school
Right.
route.
Yeah.
I
Right.
think it will
So-
become one.
Yeah,
Possibly.
It probably
and,
could
and
be.
that's,
That's when then we
and
can
that's a
address it.
concern.
So we'll monitor it.
Yeah.
Which-
But the kids that get to school now, they get to school with a crosswalk and a crossing guard,
Yeah.
and they hopefully won't change their pattern.
If they
but-
do, we have to look at
And
it.
if they
But yeah,
do,
the
I'd
primary
be
value is
very
on
willing
weekends
to
and
raise
evenings.
that concern and address it. I don't see any reason not to, but
Okay. The nice thing is this is pedestrian activated, so even when there isn't a crossing guard,
You can still push the
it's
flash.
very visible to vehicles. It also adds nighttime lighting, right, street lights, not signals, but lights.
Right.
So it's, well, I'm looking at 2 lights, there's already 1 light there, I had to add 1, so diagonal from each other, so it's well lit.
So do you add those, orange flags that you can carry back and forth, or do those
No,
prove
those
to
get
be any?
stolen.
They get
pretty
lost,
much-
they get lost.
They
So
do end
no,
up
this
being a
would be-
continuous Eagle Scout project for the city, for the indefinite future.
Definitely.
So, no, this would.
I wanted to say something, it's so important that the community knows that we spend $40,000 on
Yeah.
something as simple as a crosswalk. And as I saw the initial bid, and then I looked at what it involves, and I think that's really crucial knowledge for the community to know that we invest in the safety of our citizens, and somebody like Robert goes out of his way to provide that, but it's also important to know where tax dollars are going. I would never have guessed. I would have thought 5,000 max or something like that, so.
And that's with us doing the labor. too,
Wow.
so.
Yeah, people-
Those signs are really expensive and the lights are expensive, those are the big price
Yeah.
items, but that's the price you pay for safety.
Yeah, it
People
is.
tend to think that it's just a can of spray paint and
Right.
paint some lines on the
Exactly,
street,
yeah.
Right.
it's just not.
Okay,
Can we
that's
move
all I
on?
had.
Can
Okay,
we
put it on the,
You.
Can we move on the engineering standards?
Yeah.
yeah, so on
Do
that.
you wanna write that as a consent, is that where
um,
you decided on that one?
I was
Oh.
thinking if we can.
I would just
Well,
include it
it's-
in the budget
What-
opening.
yeah,
it's money.
So,
So we can
not,
make sure
not a
it's
consent, it'll just be one of the items on the budget opening.
Alright,
On the engineering standards, so this is relating to secondary water meters. We know legislation passed it, and it is, we would be required to, April 1st, 2020, to have that mandated. So we can wait till then, or we can
No.
This behooves us
or
to
we
be
can do it
expeditious.
sooner. If we do it sooner, then we're gonna save ourselves money in the long
I
run.
Yeah, it's
hate
2/3
unfunded
the amount.
mandates, though.
Apparently.
Right.
I mean, really shame on the legislature for putting this kind of burden on cities with no funding available. That just really,
You say you can apply for a grant.
it smacks of.
No, it's a loan.
It smacks
A
of,
loan,
okay, you
a
guys
loan, they did
locally,
take the grant.
It was a loan, yeah.
what it says is you guys locally, please go raise everybody's taxes.
Get a
Mhm.
loan.
And you take the heat
Yep.
for it, so we can take your money somewhere else.
So this part is just saying new construction, but yeah, it'll.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is,
Yeah.
gonna be a
So-
big expense.
So what would you like to do? I don't want to move forward with this. If this is something you would like, this would have to go on the planning commission, for discussion and recommendation,
Yes.
and then it come back to you.
Yes.
So,
I
but I
think
don't
the
wanna go
standard
there
for
if you
new
guys
build-
don't want to.
Yeah, no, standard for new build has to be adjusted because of the law.
yep,
Yeah.
and
We don't
so
get much choice.
we need
Okay.
to do this as fast as possible to try and
Yes.
limit the impact to the citizens
Yep.
of the
And
community.
later.
Okay,
But
thank you.
At what point do we have to start reading them?
Oh,
That's
good,
not
that's,
even
on the
don't
agenda.
go there yet, don't ask the question.
We,
It's gonna be dictated
We
to
are
us
not
soon enough,
required
I'm
to-
That's
sure.
as far
So,
as-
but
just
that's,
need to
I'm
get
just
them
verifying that
installed.
we're not gonna read them just cause they're there yet.
I'd have to check on what actually passed, but a previous draft at least.
Because you had to inform
just
them
have
what
You
they
have
use.
to inform them of their use.
Yeah.
I'll have to look
So
into
when
that,
we
but-
start allowing them, we have to start reading them.
But we don't have to start informing them of their
But
use
read 'em
until
anyway.
20.
All our
Well,
other.
we
ones.
agree.
But if you only have like.
We just have the radio on it, and so if you pick it up, it'd be easy.
Yeah.
They have to
And if there's
install
only
them.
300
Don't
though, that's not
have
gonna
to
tell
read
you
them for
much.
that many years.
But they would have
Yeah.
radios, so,
That makes
so
sense.
that's
I
not
know.
that's not a problem.
Not a problem, good.
When we
Right.
were talking about
Council,
the
Okay,
legislature.
I will
Yeah.
put that on
Radios.
planning commission.
Robert, you got what you need?
That's all.
Great.
Good thing we went to review.
Let's go to H, recommendations on the linear park.
All right, guys, it's time for the linear park.
Okay.
It's ready to go. Do you want me to go over it, or do you guys
I have a couple of
read it?
questions. For starters, these bike ramps, I thought we voted those out. And I did check with a former city council member, and she agreed with me that we voted them out, so.
I don't think that they were voted out. I think you guys had to take it out to bid and see if it comes in under bid and put it in the line items.
What we discussed taking out was the hammocks.
Yes,
They're
that
gone.
Well, they're
was
gone.
for sure.
Thank goodness.
But the other.
Everything else was kind of dependent on the budget.
Okay, so here's the thing. I am not a fan of putting amenities in a park that is intended for people to pass through it. However, if we're gonna do this, the bike ramps as designed, I think are a tragedy. And they're going to be an insurance nightmare. Because the design of them is the kind that they use in downhill motocross and downhill snowboarding events, where you build up speed, you go over them, and in fact, the intent is that you jump from one to the other, so you're flying through the air, and
That was totally not the picture that we were shown.
the
when we
picture that I was shown is the
No.
Kelly one, it goes up and over.
I'm just saying that.
This
when-
one right here, you're talking about this?
Yes,
This,
but,
but that's not
but
the
that's not the
original.
original picture that
Oh.
we were shown.
Where's the-
And,
Okay.
and it was very, very
It was
slopey,
gradual and sort of
gradual.
built.
So
No,
my
but-
concern about this one is that we're going to have a lot of kids with broken arms, and somebody's gonna call and say, gee, you know, we petitioned to get it removed. I don't wanna build anything that we have to remove. But I looked into something else, and so I just wanna throw this out there as an alternate, if we're gonna consider something at all. I have, and I'm sure you all are doing the same, been speaking to young scouts for their requirement for meeting with the
Weeblos.
civic leader, with the Weeblos.
Yes.
And I always take that opportunity to say to them, so let me hear from you guys. What do you guys want to see in the city? Almost without an exception, they're all talking about skate park. I say, we have a skate park. And they say, oh, but, you know, there's different problems. What if we just put something like this, and we can pass this around? This is like a quarter pipe that's sunk in. And so it gives them a chance to practice their tricks.
It's a beginner
It's
skate
a
ramp.
beginner skate ramp. It's low level.
What's the drainage like on it?
Well, that's it. It does have drainage included. And,
Swimming pool.
and here's some variations on a theme that have been done a lot of places. Pass that around.
Do you have an idea on cost?
Actually, I do.
Awesome.
So this one that I first put around, now it is beyond what we would probably need because it's metal. It has ground venting and lights that are in the bowl for night use. But it's being sold on Pinterest for the exact same, yeah.
This isn't like connected to anything.
No.
So I'm wondering if like a kid going to school will get stopped. See, the idea of those was to keep going.
Is it funny that I want to do that? To see it a little closer.
It is funny, but surprisingly, this is just short of the same budget that we already have. So, but I believe that if we did the concrete ones, we'd be able to do like twice as many from what I just did a quick check. I called a friend at a concrete company. If we did one of these doubles, we'd probably do twice as many. And the way it serves that, I think, is also, we have a lot of kids that get stuck. The line item is bike ramp, $22,000, which is double what anyway, a lot of kids have complained that the thing that's wrong with our skate park is that they form lines and they have to wait their turn. And then sometimes we get these older kids who come by and they're disrespectful and scare all the kids off. This
Are we
gives
gonna
them
have
another-
that problem just over at the linear park?
Here's why I'm thinking we won't. It's right next to a major road. We're not gonna attract the loiterers. We're gonna
Well, no,
attract
like
the kids
the-
who actually skate.
Cause Founders is like one of the, there's tons of people there all the time.
Yeah,
That was
but
my concern.
what we did.
Problems we're having at the skate park, we're just gonna carry it over.
Nope. And here's why. I have been going, my son's a big scooter rider. I've been going with him quite a bit. And what happens is these older kids will go linger by a car out around, and if they eventually come over, they start harassing the little kids, which is why I go as a parent, and some of my neighbors will go. We take turns with taking the boys over there. This is gonna be right next to a main road without blocking it from plain sight. I just kind of think that if we do that, it puts more eyes on it, it puts more exposure.
Those are quite wide, I'm worried about
Yeah,
that.
so
So make them.
we would scale
Make
them.
them, yeah, scale them.
But then in some ways, it's not much different than these other
Exactly.
bump things. If they are, I think that they need to be more linear, like,
Yeah, just
Here's the
put two
really
back to
big-
back instead.
Yeah, here's the really big difference. When you do this
Actually like
up
this.
thing, what people do is they get less off the ground. They jump and they jump back down on the same path. Where you do the up and over, you're jumping from hump to hump. It's more airtime, it's more dangerous, and it takes a more advanced rider.
I like this a little
Can
bit
I
better.
stop
than-
us, can I stop us right here and just ask a quick question of Krista? Krista, what is the goal of the discussion today?
Well,
What do we need?
we came to see if we could put this to get awarded for.
Award a contract.
Award a contract, so the
And
consent, on the
I'm
consent agenda.
proposing that we look at something similar. It doesn't need to be as wide. We can scale it, however. In fact, if we scale it more narrow and get extra long, that means there's more people that get to ride on it and more
Yeah, so
chances to do
this
that.
feature is not in the bid.
It
No.
is.
It
No,
is.
but it would
It's
be the
called
bike
bike ramp.
ramps.
It's right here, see,
It's
it's
right
bike
there.
ramps,
Third
and
line
this
item
is part
down.
right here.
it's separated.
Yeah, it's separate.
Oh, it's not
I
in
can speak to the bike route if you want me to.
Thank you. We can show the original picture. if you
Yeah, I
want.
don't know, so a couple of things, whatever the council decides, I think is fine.
I think that would get more use.
The bike ramps that were in the bid, they're 1 to 2 feet high, I think. They're not meant for like, jumps.
Maybe they're
You know.
misunderstood in the drawing then, because they look like they're 3 feet high.
But at the same time, is there a need for that? Where I
Is there
think
an
this
interest?
would actually get used more.
So the thinking, and then we'll let Noah jump in. The thinking was, this is something that people do on their way to school, or
back.
At coming home from school instead of going there as a destination and staying. That was, the
And
flow.
why more perfect time to have
There's
kids
some
take their,
rolling hills in part of one end of the golf course, and my kids when they were little called it the bumpity bumps, and so this reminded me of that. And they love to go over with their bikes and stuff, so.
Noah, yeah.
But we can, it's,
So
I could go either way on this.
I'd
I
love to
can
hear the
hopefully
perspective of the
shine a
kids
little bit
on
of light
this.
because I designed
that's
it.
where this came from.
And sure. One, linear parks don't have any parking. So obviously we don't want this to be a destination where there's people parking all over, making it dangerous. And two, it's linear and narrow. And one of the goals with the linear park, and probably the #1 goal, is to screen the backs of all those homes and all of those people's backyards and give them a little bit of privacy. And a lot of residents really called and reached out to us saying, hey, what are you gonna do about the noise? And what are you gonna do about the headlights? And that row of homes gone. So there's a berm, and on top of that berm are evergreen trees. Okay, so you have a width
there are more
limitation.
trees in this park than any other park in the city.
It is quite legendary.
Yes, I'm excited. It's gonna be good. So
and it's a good
It's
entrance
expensive.
for the city. It's a great entrance for the city.
Well, this is this is a gateway park.
Okay, but here's the other thing that I just want to speak about vegetation, is that we've learned from experience that you shouldn't plant it all in the same year. Everything has a life cycle. You should plant it over 2 or 3 years so that it's staggered.
well, that's up to you guys if you want to phase it or whatever. But if you want the answer about the actual bike ramps that I didn't get a chance to get to yet, is the bike ramps. And I wasn't here to hear all of the concerns, so hopefully I can address them. Sorry, was there a problem?
No.
Okay, so the bike ramps are not to get air on, just to be clear. This is 50, there's 3 humps and it's over 50 feet long. These are gentle, there's 2 separate areas. One area is the 3 bump area, and it's a wee, the best way to describe it. And then the other one is a small one, and it's a wee, just a small, it's just for like scooters and easier. Both of them are designed to both have scooters and bikes.
Are those accurate depictions of what we're talking about?
They seem pretty smashed.
And it's hard to tell the
It is hard to tell, and it looks
I can
like
provide
if
more
it's supposed to be
details. That's
50
just a small
wide, then it looks
screenshot
really
of
high.
it, and it's a separate contractor that will be ordered, yeah. But yeah, see the one that's cement is the one that's on the left, or on the south side. See the cement one? That's the longer one, and it'll be 3, and it's a precast concrete product, and they'll ship it down and install it. Has a 3 times longer lifespan than just a normal
We
cast in place.
have kids skating in all kinds of places that they don't need to be. I think that would get really used. I can't tell you how many kids have mentioned that we need more of this kind of thing. I don't think we need the other. I don't think that
That's up to you guys.
there's
That's fine.
never been a call for it. There's never been anyone expressed that that's of interest.
It wasn't
So the
necessarily.
width
Can
of
I
that
ask
ramp?
the one younger person in the audience?
Well, first ask her if she's a skater.
A few years ago, when you used to ride your bike to school, if you ever did, what would your preference have been?
I think the little bumps would be fun, if you're
Like
just
that?
yeah, like you
On
said,
your way.
just on your way to school, just going over bumps, and obviously you can't just park and stay there for a while because it's right next to a main road.
But would you say?
That was actually the bid
I'm so
document.
glad I'm on record saying that.
And also, if I could make a comment, I think with the thing that you're saying, I think that would be great in a different park, but if you're talking about a linear park, you're not gonna, that's kind of you can't just kind of do it as you're going. You know what I mean? I mean, you could, but I don't know.
And that's the exact intent, is we want the pass through, and you have a berm going up, so you have limited width. So these are about 3 feet wide.
We
This
need
looks
to
like
help
it's maybe
Cresta.
a little bit wider.
Cresta doesn't have a direction.
I would say kick them off. I do think we should phase the plants. There's a lot of plants, and if for example, the irrigation's not quite worked out the first year, I'd hate to
lose so many all at once.
And then the other thing is, I'm okay with either one. I think the wee ramp sounds fun. I think the skateboard, I do see that is always packed. And the number one complaint I get is people get pushed out of our current skateboard park because the big kids come and the little kids have to leave.
And this isn't that far. Kids could walk over.
I like the look of these, but I don't think we have the room.
I see benefits for both.
And if we could put it someplace else, I think
And-
it'd be great.
They don't have to be more than 5 feet wide.
And there's nothing stopping us from doing a little bit of both. You know, have the bike ramp, and then instead of having the single mound, all you do is you invert that, and you could have just a little half pipe that, you know, one or two kids could go on the.
What if you did both?
No.
Yeah, that'd be really
That
fun.
same ramp company, they have a whole catalog and they have stuff like that, and they do what's called like a bike park where you have a pump track or.
Sure, but we're not
let's not go
doing
there
that.
yet.
Well, I'm not proposing, I'm just saying.
I'm just
But
saying.
yeah, that's a good thing that, yeah.
I'm just saying, let's look at the bike instead of the single bump. Maybe we compromise and do one that actually has the intro to skating. On your way to school, you go zoop and go up and down and off you go, instead of having a full on.
Yeah.
So of the pictures depicted, I like that one, okay, cause it's pretty simple. But of the points that have been brought up, what I don't wanna create
I don't want
is
it to be
a
a
place,
big
a destination
skate park.
Well, there's no parking, and that was the point that really hit home with me. There's no parking, so I don't wanna create a big thing.
But see, fortunately, people on
But I'm not-
skateboards usually aren't driving there.
Yeah, I'm not thinking that people are driving to this. I think that kids walk there
On
on
their
their
way.
way home from school. They stay and they do a little bit. Or
We've lost our way
But
again.
then you're getting stopped though, that's what I'm worried about, is that the bumps keep you going, where the other ones you're
Yeah,
tempted
I
to
don't
go
think it's
back
any
and
different.
forth for a bit.
A couple times.
Yeah, whatever.
Anyway, well, and I'm not like gonna die over this.
So should we
that's
just
for sure,
keep the
but-
money in the bid and whatever we end up doing with it, we'll do with it?
Well,
Well,
I
we need
think
to make kind of a decision,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
they've already bid on this.
Okay.
This is what they bid on, and we can do a change order.
I do
Well, that's what I'm
think
thinking.
it's
We can do a
very
change order.
important to help those residents though get as much shielding as possible, because they've gone through major construction and noise and dirt, and now they have a major road right in their backyard.
On the bright side, they
And-
have fewer neighbors.
Council, how would you feel, we're beyond time,
But I
how would you feel if we take these changes and have Cresta go back to the bid, to those, and see if this could be made to fit into the bid that they've got, or what the changes would be?
Well, I don't see a consensus, we need to know, like,
Yeah.
there's no, like, what do you wanna do, which one, and
So
how?
I think we stick with with Noah's ramp for without saying the wee ramp.
We have the rest of
Which
the
one
bid.
of those, yeah.
But I do think that we could swap out the single bump for just invert it, and I'm sure the company probably has something like that where you just.
Basically combining the two.
So you have,
and
you have,
giving
you
us
have
a
the bike
better
ramp, and then
something like that.
you have a,
In the catalog, I can see if there's.
I'm
another
sure
one.
see if there's something in there that either we dig a hole, like, kinda like that and just pour it, or we
Precast
just
like
buy
that.
the precast and just have,
Last 3 times as long, I would go for 3 times as long.
Yeah, the way it's designed
I'm
is
good with that.
the landscape contractor's gonna,
That's
so
what
there's
it
the
said.
there's the existing sidewalk, and they're gonna widen the sidewalk where the ramps will be, so that.
The wandering
ramp can be
sidewalk.
You can go on
Installed.
one side or go flat.
oh, okay.
So if we
And
do
the
that,
bids
they
all
can
came
rush
in
them.
with it to do all of this within what the budget is allotted, so we're okay as far as I understand on budget.
I'm okay spending less, for the record.
yeah,
Well, if we're gonna
But-
phase the landscaping in.
It'll be less, but we'll have to
Okay.
put that money.
So let's do that. I think it's good as is, just let's check on the half pipe.
I would say on the
Or mini half pipe.
landscaping though, you know, won't we check? I just really feel bad, because we had that one guy show up over and over and over again and trying to get us to build a wall there and everything, and.
No, I'm not
we
saying,
can't do
I'm saying we
that.
can do the trees.
Well, then,
Let's do the trees,
shrubbery,
it's just
a
all of the little
ground-
teeny, like,
There's like 100 and some odd shrubs.
I actually
on
agree
this.
that, like
So
this.
Those are ornamental grasses.
Yeah.
And so the
So
idea
they're
is
not
that
gonna
there'll
affect
be.
the
Just make sure the drip's working.
No, but.
So why would, I'm not sure I
I don't
understand
know
why we
to
would
leave it.
Wait,
phase that.
Yeah, why would you
because
say that?
traditionally when you do too many at once, half of them die, and if
Oh.
you do
Where?
them more so that they take root, and then you put some
Is
in
that
between,
usually a
they
problem?
I think if
fill
you're
in.
gonna phase, you wanna phase trees.
Or do we have a guarantee?
Because
a lot of-
that's
a
the
lot of
problem, the
plantings
trees
don't
die
have
all
a
at
one-year
Yeah.
guarantee.
Yeah, the nurseries can
You don't want the
guarantee
trees to all die the same year, and then you have to start completely over.
Let's plant every other tree over the course of.
Except for the buffer, cause you need that.
The
for
buffer I
next-
would put in, but the other trees I would put in over a 2 or 3 year period, the forward ones, because
Don't you need to put
you don't want them to die all the same year.
But that's assuming that
Yeah,
every
warranty.
tree would
There's
have
a warranty
a
on it.
20-year life or whatever.
Do you know what the
Yeah,
warranty
yeah,
is,
they do.
Robert? Was it a year?
It's a year.
There's a year
So we know by
warranty.
the next year if
If you
it's dying.
get them from Tri-City.
Council, are we anywhere where we can award the contract at our next business meeting?
Well, I will say, for purpose of your straw poll, that I'm with Jordan. I like the original and I don't really care for the one that just looks like a jump. And so if there's something else we could do to compromise.
I really wanna see something like this, because the kids that I talk to, and they wear a
Agree.
lot, they all are more, it doesn't matter whether skateboard, scooter, roller skates, BMX bikes, they all use that same structure to do their, practice their little tricks. They don't use the other one, so this is more versatile, and I'll admit, back in the long years ago, I thought to myself, oh, what if, the people build these skate parks, it might be a fad. Well, it's lasted, so, and it's just converted to all these other different forms, so I don't think we're gonna lose anything by putting in one of these little double.
Yeah, I could get the catalog and I don't really care.
Can we just
if you
do
guys
that?
look at it.
Can we just look and see what,
What is your opinion on the planting as far as like?
we keep going back between the two, let's solve one first.
So
Well,
about the little weed,
Every time
I can,
you speak to.
sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay.
No, you go ahead, we'll talk.
So the little wee, I missed the first part of the discussion on, I don't know what you guys said about that, but that one is smaller for kids, so the idea is that there'll be one side that has triple, that maybe for a little bit more advanced riders that can do 3, and the small one is lower and more spread out, and it's actually smoother than the other one's concrete, and the small one is steel with a non-slip surface, and it's smaller and it's got a line in the middle. So it's more for like more beginner riders that can just kind of go over.
I can tell you now, my 6-year-old son, well, he's not 6 anymore, 7-year-old son,
It's gonna be a hard side.
he would take a look at those two, and he's gonna be like, forget even though he's still learning, but he's immediately going to the big one.
Yeah.
And
That's true, and
okay.
if we are talking about kids going to school, then the majority of them will be older, so we're not as concerned
Yeah.
with the youngsters. But
I don't
I
want
would like to
youngsters
see
in the
what
street.
I'd love to see what you have in the catalog,
Yeah,
because
let's take a
there's
look at that.
combination of the
At my
two.
office, I can just figure it out.
Well, then do
Okay.
We'll get there.
Now let's finish the trees.
Trees.
If it's below the surface of the ground, we're gonna have to change the design and provide drainage, because it'll fill up like a bathtub with rainwater and
There's
irrigation.
also
So which just changes the.
We're already having.
So if it's something
Somebody
that
wants
can
a
fit
pool.
within, those are, the two sides are interchangeable features, so that we order from a catalog, so if you guys wanna swap something out, it's up to you guys.
I would like to.
So if we do that, we have to change engineering and drainage.
Only if you,
No,
only if you
put
drop it in the ground.
If you use the other page where they put it above ground,
Oh, okay.
Then you're good.
it's good,
I
you just
see
lay
what
it
you're
down,
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
no problem at all.
plantings.
Plantings, so I think it would look weird if we didn't do the plantings correctly, cause you're gonna have open spots, plus all of the, we've already done all of the, irrigation
You pay
for that, to come and do that.
Okay.
The trees, I think you can do every other, but I don't know how it looked with the.
One thing to consider is that the spacing, we're gonna buy these and plant them as smaller, and so the spacing's already taking into account their mature size. So if you go every other and they're small, it's gonna be more sparse. But it is true that if you can layer the plantings over time, you have different sizes, and it provides some depth, and you have more,
And you're never
ability.
replacing the whole thing at once.
Yeah, I mean, some of these trees
You
are
al-
30 years, some of them are 50 or 60 years, and some of them will die early.
You also
There's
have
always
to-
like
It's
10%.
a crapshoot a little bit, but
You also have to look at, like, right now, we have people there, we're paying them to do it now. You're gonna have to, again, bring back people and pay them again. So there's,
The last thing, just where on these, there's a couple points here where just the sheer volume of plants was a little high. I just wanted to get your perspective on maintenance of that, where there's just a lot of these little plantings.
I mean, we looked over it and Chad looked over it and he's fine with it. A lot of this he's put in as native and it's drip lines, and so it's not a lot of, there's mulch and it's not a lot of.
It looks like it might fill in and be easier to maintain because it's full rather than.
Well, that's what I mean, of like, if you picked where the plantings were, it would almost look weird that you have a couple here and then this is all empty and there's a couple more here.
Council, let's move on, let's move this to the business meeting for approval, and in the meantime, would you look at some of the, if you have suggestions to them, if you make contact with Cresta and Noah, all kinds of devices that you'd like there, that maybe we'll swap something out.
I do love trees, so I think this is.
Because I think we can hammer this out in a business session.
But you're okay, at least for the bid amount, not going over?
No.
Okay.
I think it's great that you got what you have with.
Yeah, that's a huge
amount you
difference
have.
between those.
I was
bids.
shocked, I'll be honest.
It's really good.
I was told we could get rid of some of these ends. No.
No takers yet.
Thank you, council. Let's move on. We're aye, Steve.
We could just get the school to pay it. We could now.
Alright, budget opening discussion. Hopefully you all had a chance to review it. I'm not gonna go through everything in detail. I'll just hit some high points, and then if you have questions, I'll answer those. So this is our mid-year, almost 3/4 of the year through. So we tend to do more adjustments with this one. As you see in the general fund, there's 6 or 8 line items for revenues. 2 big wins in there. The wildland fire revenue came in almost 3 times, 2.5 times what our budget was.
Bless them for earning it.
With that, though, comes cost for overtime. So you'll see down in the fire department, $50,000 for an expense, but a net gain. Sales tax is projected to come in $100,000 over budget. Another good win there. As far as expenses, the CD budget, we did contract with Clearfield to help them out with their building during that time. So there's $12,000 in expense, but if you look at the contract review fees at 13, comes right back in. The streets, there's 2 different things going on here. One is the public works inspector we talked about. We put in the wage scale. That's for a quarter of the year, so about 20,000 of that. And then we have an employee that's retiring in April, and so there's some payout for leave on him as well. As far as other things going on, we did increase and change some budgets for depreciation expense. We added in the capital fund $70,000 for equipment for the inspector, $40,000 for a vehicle, $30,000 for the GPS equipment. I think we've talked about these before. And then there's just some other minor adjustments throughout the budget. Do you guys have any specific questions for me on what you've seen in the packet?
Thank you. It was a really good job.
Yeah.
We did not add the 40,000 because we wanted to talk with you today about it.
But we do need to add that.
Yeah.
Which 40,000?
For the
crosswalk.
Oh, yeah.
Right, that will be added for the next one.
Thank you.
It's fine.
Are there any questions?
No.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Let's come back to the planning items. Noah, are you still with us? Let's take just a minute. Stacy, are you here?
Yeah,
Let's
I'm
move
here.
you ahead.
Wanna
Let's
go
go
to
down.
K?
Let's go to K.
All right. All right, I've never done this before.
So far, so
Okay.
good.
You'll be
So,
You can sit down.
You can do that.
I'll sit down. I just wrote down what I'm gonna say and gave you guys some artwork. Okay, so, I'm Stacy Metcalf. I'm here as a representative of Syracuse High high school and their athletic department. I've enclosed letters too from head football coach Mike Knight and also from the principal, Jed Johansson. As we travel to different athletic functions, it's clear that we are a new school. There's so much tradition surrounding schools that have been around for decades. As you drive around Roy City, you see home of the Royals on their roundabouts, along their streets, and branding of the high school all around the place.
It's a good school.
Is that what you meant? The same can be said for Davis High School and Kaysville City, and also Bountiful High School in the city where I used to live. Now, as a citizen of Syracuse, I can see and have discussed at length with the principal and the coaches that we need to try to start incorporating our high school into our community and get some traditions going in our city. This is where we need your help. We have several ideas that we would like to pursue, but first we have one that may seem kind of unlikely to happen, but I know you guys are all going to help me make it happen.
I'm already working on it.
Right? Let's see, I think it would make huge impact to school spirit, community spirit, and recognition as Syracuse as the home of the Titans. I've waited for a couple years to come before you because of the construction on 2000 West, but now that it's completed, I'd like to propose that a Titan logo be painted in the intersection of 2000 West and 700 South. The same thing has been done at Mountain Crest High in Hiram, Utah, and there are also several examples of it on the internet as well. This is not something that I would say would be done haphazardly. We've contacted graphic designers, template designers, and professionals to help in this endeavor. We would take care of the cost. We would do it from fundraising. We would take care of all the laborers. I realize that we would need to come up with permission from UDOT, permits, traffic plans, and that's where we kind of need your help, because I don't know how to get all that done. As this is a state road, I realize if it wasn't to be approved by UDOT, we were hoping that we would have an alternate plan that you guys would approve to do logos on either side of 700 South. Anyway, I just ask that you guys would take this under consideration, help us to get it approved. I'd also love to have like a liaison with somebody on the city council that, you know, we have several other ideas that it would be nice to not have to go through a huge process like this, but maybe have somebody that we could be in contact with that say, hey, we would like to do this or that.
So who's our Syracuse
I am,
liaison?
and I have talked to Jed frequently.
And did he mention my name? Just
No.
kidding.
Sorry. I talk to him frequently and let him know that I'm more than happy to help with anything.
Okay.
But we all have similar problems in that his primary meeting with parents is at 9 a.m. on Wednesdays when a lot of us work.
Right, and I went in and talked to him. I set up a meeting separately because this is something that has kind of been like, I really want to do. I talked to the former mayor about this, but then he's like, oh, well, we're going to be doing construction, and so he's like, wait till that's over.
I know that this is possible because I'm a Mountain Crest alum.
See?
And
so you know.
And
is it a state road?
That's a state road. It is a state road.
So it is possible to do this, but
Okay.
it's just a matter of how, and I would suggest that you contact Mountain Crest to find out how they do it.
I've been working with Trent Barney on this too. You know Trent Barney?
I do know Trent.
He's my neighbor. And so I've reached out to UDOT. They haven't responded yet.
Okay. I've also understood that one of the head guys at UDOT does live in Syracuse. Is this correct? I've been talking here with Morgan Pavement, and they said that. Anyone know?
Depends on who in UDOT. There probably is.
Yeah, but whether or not they're over this road is.
So
right.
We used to do this at my high school, but we did it every year.
Well, it would need to be updated.
And every class would have something approved, and then people from that class would go out and paint it. And there were different places in the city, and of course if one lasted, then they just go paint more. So they ended up with lots of them painted around the city. I don't have, the labor was students. We had to assist with some parking, police effort to keep things blocked off and safety. But I don't have any problem with this. I think it's a great idea.
I think it'd be awesome. I think that intersection is huge. It would be perfect. I don't know how to go about it as far as getting it approved, and so that's kind of where,
If you do the main road on 2000, and I mean, I realize it's a heavier traffic road, but if you do that, it will wear away faster because
right,
it's
but
the most
everybody will
traffic.
see it.
Yes. If
But for how long?
But
That's the
it's,
point.
it's a main road on Mountain
Yeah.
Crest too, and
So
everybody.
It
let's-
is a main road, and we also, I've talked to Morgan Pavement about types of paint that will last longer, they're more expensive, but we're willing to do it. The cost of the template is about $3,000. It's something that we would use on the football field, and it would,
Template? Wow, we just.
well, see, that's the thing.
Yeah, you're talking the class pictures.
Different from back then.
They want an official school.
Well,
logo.
here's the reason why.
We're old.
I know.
We think it the old way.
Well, this is why I was thinking UDOT might say, you know, oh, we don't want just anybody going and painting whatever.
Yeah.
And so if we have a template, and if, you know, they approve the design and say, okay, and this is how we're gonna do it, and it's a reusable template, so it's something we can reuse every year, and so it's worth the investment. We can use it on the football field, even when it turns to turf, which.
I don't object, I just,
I'm-
I'm surprised at what we got out of people that weren't
Yes.
using templates.
Well,
Robert remembers,
and they
he
do
and I-
that all over the campus of the school. They
Yeah.
paint at homecoming and stuff like that. But as far as doing, I just wanted something visible. I just feel like you go to these other schools and it's like, it's in your face, it's everywhere. And since we're a new school, I feel like we need to get it out there. This is the home of the Titans. Get some pride in the community and in the school. I just feel like if we, and there, I mean, there's a bunch of other things that we wanna do, but I just wanted to maybe slide this in.
So,
And see what you guys thought.
so one thing, I want you to make sure you're aware of, anything like this, you probably wanna keep it close to the high school.
Yeah.
Not around town,
Right.
because we have a lot of residents that are Clearfield High.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
But no, I think this right here,
And that's
where you
perfect,
have
the
it,
location,
I think it's
and everything.
perfect, and for the record, I like this one.
You like the one with the sword? Okay.
That's my
I didn't know if they were
favorite.
gonna be like no weapons or something weird like that.
Let me
but-
No,
survey
they
the.
totally embrace it.
did you get the?
I did.
No, but there's a map under there
I got the map.
with the two different options, okay.
Let me do this, council, I'm not seeing much objection to this.
No.
Totally great.
David, would you represent then the group as the liaison?
Yes, I have.
And would you continue forth with this?
Yep.
Okay.
Um,
So I need to get your information, and Jed and I are in contact a lot as well, so I'm gonna really get mad at him for not already giving you my name. I'm just gonna throw this in here really quick, just cause I have your ear. We'd also like to, obviously, there are small signs that say Titan Way that are itty bitty, but we'd like the big, huge Titan Way where it says 700 South.
Would that be okay, Robert?
Can we do that?
Well, that's the cost.
Yeah.
We just
I
have
mean-
four signs, we do four signs. I can't put them up on the UDOT signal pole,
Right.
but on the smaller, lower street signs. I
Oh,
can
they
do
don't
some.
let you do the great?
No.
It's
Well, no,
their
she's.
sign.
They should
Are you
approve it.
calling
Oh,
700 Titan Way?
No, which.
Or are you
Well-
calling 2000 Titan Way?
Well, no, it would be, but it's 700, but it goes over 2,000.
Cause 700 is, you could have other ones along that road.
So on the.
Yeah, there are
But on the
tiny
signal
ones,
poles,
but I'm
you
saying
got
that big, huge signal pole, it says
Yeah, that's
700.
UDOT. We
So,
don't-
so I
we
think,
can't
you'd have to
authorize
coordinate.
yeah,
There's some
it's not that
coordination
it
you
can't
do.
be done,
You have
it's
to
just.
We can't
That's
authorize
what
UDOT
I
has
talked
to
to him when
authorize it.
you're asking about
I was
this,
just
talk
gonna
to him
say,
about that.
So, where do we go forward with this? What do I need to do? What do you need to do? And
You've done it.
I've done it?
We're gonna try.
You're gonna
We'll-
take care of
we'll-
it and
We'll
you'll.
ask, but we can't promise, cause that's not ours to promise.
Right. If they say no, would you guys be totally good with us doing something on either side of 2,000 and do it on 700?
Would you really want it on both sides of 2000 or just the 2000 front, or the 7?
On each side.
Well, no, but I mean, on the 700, cause you're gonna do a 700 across the street from the school and 700 on the street of the school.
Yeah, I don't know, just to
I'm
have
okay
some,
with that, but I
just to have some symmetry, I don't know. I'll come
I
back.
have no problem with this.
I just really, I feel like, you know, you go to Davis and it's everywhere. And I just think,
Davis,
and I mean,
Davis
they were the
and Weaver
first
were the
high
two
school, so.
schools of this entire area, and they have a lot of tradition, which.
Right, and it's like, where did it start?
It's
So-
time for us to get in their faces.
We need to.
Oh, really?
Stinking darts.
Okay, I will, tell me your name.
They're so
Corinne.
I can tell you a funny story, but
Joel's
it's not
mom,
good.
okay.
Council, I think we've accomplished what we needed to
Okay.
accomplish tonight.
Okay.
Yes, we support you.
Thank you.
Let's
I
go ahead
appreciate
and
it.
move on. Okay, back to planning items with Noah, item number 1.
Or L?
Wait.
Is it L?
I don't know.
J1.
Oh, J1.
Quadrennial? Oh,
Okay.
J1, okay.
I'll go back to
Home
that then.
occupation parking standards.
J1.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Got
well,
it.
anyway, I'll let you say your.
So, if you remember, a while back, we talked about parking for home occupation standards.
Right.
Some of the home occupations designed to allow people to run business out of their home as long as it doesn't disrupt the neighborhood quality. So,
Right.
So sometimes these businesses, they grow, what do you do when they have lots of vehicles, and what about the unique circumstances if geographically, if they're on an arterial or not, or
Makes
and
it commercial.
yeah, and so we sent that to planning commission, and planning commission talked about it, and ultimately, they didn't think it was, they're forwarding a recommendation to keep it at 1 vehicle per home occupation. So that's what this language is in here. While they were in Rome, they just kind of cleaned it up a little bit to make it read better, but essentially it still says the same thing. But
Plus,
yeah,
vehicle weight.
and yeah. So it's up to you guys as far as whether or not you want to keep it at 1 vehicle, or if you think, they did discuss the merits of saying, well, what if you just let the home occupation business create a parking lot in their backyard and have fencing and landscaping, and so it's screened, so who cares if they fill up the whole backyard with vehicles for their business. And ultimately they were like, well, what about if they said, if that was next to me, I wouldn't want my home next door neighbor to have this whole backyard full of vehicles. So they just said, let's just keep it the way it is. They looked at some other cities, and other cities have similar regulations as far as home occupation vehicles.
I'm willing to expand it to a truck and a trailer.
I agree. Because, for instance, I have neighbors who have really huge fifth wheels, and it has the name of that fifth wheel company splashed across it. And nobody says a word about it. Okay? It's advertising for that fifth wheel company. And there it is, the big, huge trailer there, and I don't see the difference. I mean, so because somebody has a home occupation, and we're gonna criminalize that behavior because it's a different kind of, it has different advertising on the trailer.
But to be clear, I think a box truck warrants a different standard than, say, if I have a couple of pickup trucks.
Yeah.
But does it, if they're parking it behind
If they're
the front of
parking
their, if it's contained within their driveway, does it really
What's a trailer
affect us,
considered?
you know?
Because let me ask this question. Do we currently have any restriction on the number of cars you can have in your backyard?
We do.
Yes, we actually do.
We already went through that.
And what is that? Maybe I'm not familiar with that.
Well, we changed it my first year on, and it
Yes,
was
it's per
1
driver.
per driver. So you can't have 10 cars you're working on, because that's what we had. We had people
Right.
complaining that they were creating junkyards of
Right.
future projects, and they would never get to them. They were just creating a junkyard in their backyard.
See, I don't like that, because what if I want to restore a car?
You can.
You can.
You can have one.
You and your
You can
wife.
one per
And
driver.
if your wife is a driver, you can have 2 that you're working on. But if you don't, you
Oh, so I
can't
can have one additional car? So
one
I can have.
additional car for, or no, you can have one
No,
additional.
one that you're working on.
You can have one project,
driver.
non-running car. You can have whatever runs, you can have extra cars, but not one non-working
Right.
vehicle
It's a
per
restoration
driver.
permit, so if you work on
Right.
cars.
You have to get a permit from the city. But, and a lot of people have not, but we've had a lot of people who had 4, 6,
multiple-
even one person who supposedly had 15 and had one driver in the house.
I'm not
and
aware of this.
Right.
That was
Okay.
a problem?
So, but in the case though where you have a truck with a trailer on it, according to this, I mean, you've got the vehicle and the trailer already covered, but, I mean, so what if you're what do they call a snap-on guy with a bigger box truck? So he parks it on the side of his house. I don't see what's the problem here?
What if his
personal
wife
property
is a Snap-on driver too?
Oh, and what is the likelihood? All these,
This is a tough ordinance to
Yeah.
blanket the whole
Yes.
city because there's
I
so
know.
many different kinds of vehicles,
true.
there's so many different locations like the one that was brought to us.
Right.
which
And we
is
have
six.
agriculture
So
property,
here-
which requires a lot more vehicles.
What is a trailer considered?
And
That's
most-
my question.
and
What
most-
does that mean?
most of the discussion too that was brought up was actually complaints about his neighbor and not necessarily the one who brought the petition forward. Okay, so I'm just pointing out that there are violations that happen already, but what are we really willing to land on?
Because I'm willing to go a little bit farther than, I respect their changes and their opinions, and I think they probably made a good decision in not just opening it up. So I do commend the commission for the work they put into this. However, I think they might be just slightly too restrictive in some of these because, yeah, like right now, there's
It's a truck and a trailer.
yeah, there's no you can't have a trailer according to this.
It says an occupational vehicle and trailer on the top line.
Wait, yeah. Oh, and trailer up there, okay, and A. I was looking at B, apologies.
Yeah,
So
and there was a draft that existed with planning commission where if you were located on one of the arterial streets that you were allotted more vehicles. But that's something that we could bring in
Like
another
my
work session.
next door neighbor has two of those big box trailers, but there's no commercial writing on it, so it's okay. So, but if I put a commercial sign on it, then all of a sudden it's wrong. So I guess I'm having a problem with that negotiation.
I think it really shouldn't matter how much has the signage on it. It should be the quantity of things that you have parked at your residence.
So the question
If you have more than you can handle in your driveway,
Well, see, right
you need to go
now-
find another place for it.
Right now, it's fine, and it's totally contained in their driveway along the side of their house, and it looks great and
And I'm
everything.
okay with
But if
that.
it had signage on it, I wouldn't care either. That's my point.
I
It's
agree
totally
with you.
contained, so why are we
Council, I'm gonna move us on in 3 minutes.
fussing?
So I guess the question is, do we wanna leave it at where the planning commission has it, or do we want to loosen it up just a
Which is
little bit?
basically two vehicles, one truck and one trailer. Is the trailer enclosed? Is the trailer a flatbed? What are we talking about?
We're
Does it
talking-
matter?
It
Either
doesn't
one?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, so just a trailer, okay.
I want it to be
Sorry, I
okay
did ask
for
that question.
the toasted cheeser guy on 2700 to park his vehicles, cause that doesn't bother me at all, the way he's got it situated.
He's also not your neighbor.
I know.
So, I mean, but seriously, the one that they were worried about was more the limo in front of the other guy's house. Now, it didn't even have anything. Granted, this ordinance applies to everyone, so we need to be considerate of that. But I also have to say, the limo's totally on his driveway, not blocking the sidewalk. What's the problem?
I'm more concerned just that it's contained in a safe way.
Yeah.
I don't really care, I mean, if you've got places for it, if you have a half acre to the side of your house and you've poured driveway so that it's all kept up, I don't care what you put on your
I'd kinda
acre.
like to see a scale on this for different sized lots.
Why don't I bring back there's a version that's kinda like what you guys are talking about, that planning commission had already considered, but chose they didn't want
We
to.
do expect people to be professional about their business and not just look
Definitely.
like somebody once had a business and now all the rummage of
kept
that is
everything,
now
yeah.
in around their home. That's not acceptable.
Can we put in a term that says it cannot look junky?
And Jordan
As long as
is
there's
the.
a clear definition.
And I get to
He's the
decide.
connoisseur of that.
I'm sure they'd be happy to send you
Call
out.
Jordan, he'll explain it to you.
You can be our junk
Complaints,
ordinance
defer to
officer.
Jordan.
I don't have a problem restricting this down to single vehicles. I just want it to be professionally maintained.
Okay.
And not obstruct traffic. I'm more concerned with those who try to park on the street several vehicles, because then they block
Yes,
traffic,
I'm with
they block
that.
sight lines.
Yeah.
That's a
Agreed.
problem.
Agreed.
Yep.
Like for instance, I know of one lady, and this is in Layton, so it doesn't apply here. She has a little in-home business where they print out these decals, large decals, and she has one lady who comes to her house and works for her. According to their definition, that would be not allowed because you can't have anybody come. But if I went and it was my best friend's house, I went there every day and parked in her driveway, what's the difference? I don't understand. So.
Well, we don't have that problem in our city.
I know, I'm just pointing
Yeah.
out the differences of
Yeah.
home occupation, that we're really picking nits on some of these things, but if it's not blocking traffic, what's the problem?
Yeah, I think we're getting closer, but I do think it's a little bit too restrictive.
Yep. Yeah, we have a few properties that are in limbo that are out of compliance with our ordinance, and while we've been working on this, they want to see some resolution. So I can bring back what previous version.
I don't wanna shut anybody down who's being clean and respectful. There's
Agreed.
no
Way,
interest
I
in
don't
that.
wanna make it hard
I'm
for
going
them to
to-
do business in our city.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to deviate from my rule and let the current applicant, the toasted cheeser guy, talk.
We saw the trucks out there, and we drove by, and my mouth started watering. Thanks for that.
I just wanted to, and thank you for.
Did you wanna bring samples?
I had the truck out there. I just came from an event, so.
I was knocking on the door out there, like, hey!
I just wanted to reiterate that none of my trucks are, in the road. They're all parked, 100 feet back off the road, probably. I'm sure you all know where I live, so
Yeah.
they're all parked probably 100 feet back. I have a nice gravel driveway. I'm on almost an acre lot. There's no obstruction, nothing like that. You know, my business has expanded, as you guys know, so that's kind of where we're at.
I don't
If I
find
wind up
anything very
having
offensive.
to get rid of my trucks, I'll have to probably sell and move out of Syracuse. You know, that's kind of where we're at, because I can't afford to open a restaurant somewhere to keep these trucks. You know, so fortunately, when we bought the place, it was big enough, and at the time I was a fireman. I wasn't a food guy at all. So you know, the land worked out good, but you know, I have my shop and everything else back there. But like I said, I just want to reiterate that I'm at least 100 feet back off the road. There's no obstruction. And yes, my neighbor, I agree, he needs to probably clean up some of his projects.
I'm gonna call it here, and thank you for your input. Sounds like you have another suggestion, another draft of something.
Yeah, the planning commission had considered kind of some other language.
Council, would you support us moving this into a work session perhaps after the business meeting?
Sure.
Continuing discussion on it.
But I would at this time say, for those who are out of compliance on the ordinance we're working on, just be patient with them, because I think very clearly, as long as people are trying to work with us, we're not trying to be punitive, we're just trying to work things out.
Great.
All right, we'll move this, and if you'll provide us some discussion items there. And I need to correct myself, he is not an applicant. Appreciate your input. Number 2, discussion of potential creation of a mixed-use development zone.
Thanks.
Okay, so it's been asked that this be on the agenda. I've done a little bit of research. It's provided in the packet. I'm not sure where you want to start. I could present the main points to what we want for the mixed-use zone. I've called every city in the county, asking them about mixed-use zone and apartments and what they allow and don't allow. That's in the packet as well. Remember, we also had a developer some conversation about, well, what do developers even want? And so I have a letter in the packet from what a developer would generally need as far as density.
So,
and
can I
some
talk to
things
that?
consider.
Well, I'll let you finish, then I'll ask my question.
Okay.
Sorry, I get excited.
That's good. Me too. So there's things to consider with the mixed-use development. and some things that I discovered when calling other cities is they, where they've been successful, a lot of times they're actually an overlay zone on top of commercial. So if it's already zoned general commercial, then you can go ahead and do a mixed use overlay over that. So it kind of restricts that. A lot of the average units per acre are around 25 units per acre. Some of the feedback I've been getting is in mixed use you have what's called vertical mixed use and horizontal mixed use. So a lot of cities will force vertical mixed use, but then sometimes that first floor remains vacant, which the vertical mixed use is very attractive and can be really successful in urban environments, but sometimes if it's not the right context or density around there, that business really struggles to keep up with just the however many units are in the development. So generally having the flexibility to do horizontal mixed use and take into account the proximity. We've talked about this before, where if the property is located next to Smith's or an existing commercial, so that being able to count that to be part of the project or part of the mixed use area, you would put the overlay over all of it. And some of the other points that I think are important is the architecture and the common space, and because this is more dense, this would be more dense than anything else that we have in the city, so we want to make sure we get them in the right place and really capitalize on the density's ability to drive commercial development and drive that sales tax and those point of sales. So the feedback we're getting is about 25 units per acre, and the developer letter that we had was saying that he wouldn't actually build more than 25 because when you get above that, you have to start doing things like elevators and different kinds of construction that would result in higher rents, and there's not the demand to live in an apartment, at least is what they thought.
So that's what I wanted to touch on. So a couple things that I feel are is it okay?
I'm done.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
A couple things I want to touch on is, so in your recommendation up here, you said look at 25 to 30, but then we just had a contractor say he's not willing to do more than 25, and you look at all the surrounding zones, 25 is the absolute highest of any city in the area. Most of them range between 12 to 20.
I think Farmington said no limit, which was interesting.
Well, there's two columns that say max density.
Well, there are.
Yeah.
There's actually three things. So if you look, that one's townhomes, okay, and then the next one over is apartments, and then on the far right column is mixed use. And so if you look at the max density, have 33, 25, 15, no max, 28 units per acre.
So N means no
12.
max.
Yeah, NA is not.
They don't have one.
Yeah.
It's all over the place.
Yeah, so we're ranging anywhere from 12 to 33.6, because it's awfully specific.
Yeah, and the ones that
They had a big debate about that.
I know.
She provides, and these are like large generalities, so you can see the general.
One thing that I think is missing is, so I saw this contractor specifically said Provo is well structured, and they were actually thought that they had done a good job, but we don't have Provo in here as a data point. I guess I'd kind of like to see that. If this is something that the developers are saying that they did a good job on this, I'd like to understand why they said that and kind of what that is. It might be just a nice data point to have.
Okay.
It's
Yeah,
definitely an
I just
interesting
need to
point.
know.
They're also a university town though too. So
I was
they're-
gonna say,
Agree.
Provo's a very different
Very different,
beast
but
than us.
I don't want to start over, create a mixed use from nothing. I'd like to, if they think Provo has they said well structured. They didn't say anything about density. They just said, and I liked. Let me read their exact comment. They just said, where is it?
Provo has well-structured mixed-use zone.
Yeah.
I read that one.
And so in that, I guess I'd like to see a copy of their zone, kind of see what they did with it. Because yeah, we definitely want to have both horizontal and vertical possibilities. I like the idea of treating these as a zone as opposed to a specific development, so that if the area around them already has all the stuff that we want, then we'll let them kind of take advantage of that.
I don't see this happening anytime soon.
Yeah, but at the same time, and this is not gonna be a shock to anyone, I think 25 and 30 are really high. I think I'd like to see something more in the realm of 15 to 20.
Well, I'm a little intrigued by those that don't have a number.
Yes, what is
So
that?
tell me about
that?
form-based, and then tell me, but we know about development agreements, but tell me how these cities utilize those tools.
Sure.
With no maximum.
So form-based zoning is something that a lot of cities have gone towards, where they have a form that they have in mind, like, you know, if they like the look of a main street, or they like the look of certain types of buildings, they don't get caught up in
The minutia.
the number of units per acre. They're more concerned with the architecture and how it looks and how it functions, and so they don't even have a cap. They just say, as long as
It looks right.
and there's
You
certain
build it what we want it to
areas.
look like.
There's kind of something to be said for that. I think that, I mean, having gone to different cities and seen some really beautiful pieces of architecture that I don't know how many units are in that, I just know it's really well done. And then another that might even be lower end, for density, but it's poorly done. So, yeah, and I'm not saying we should do that, I'm just saying there's something to be said for it.
And so then the development agreement, how are they using that to guide?
They just show the picture of it, and what they're
Yeah,
doing?
yeah, so I could provide more information, but basically they have different areas within a city for the form that would qualify for different forms, right? And as long as they meet that and they have a development agreement to ensure that they follow through.
And I think that's actually intriguing, especially based on, as we've been looking at some of the outcomes of the Vision 2050, you know, they identified this lot right over here as somewhere they want to see that type of structure, or at least a specific Main Street type structure, which this might be one way we could kind of say, look, in this area we want it to look like this. But we would need a developer agreement. I think as far as limits go, you know, we're not going to approve 100 or 50, but as long as there's a developer agreement's in place, that might be something interesting to do there. But overall, so that's in that location. In the rest of the places, I definitely want to keep it to, and I think we need to stop calling it high density, because high density just has a really negative connotation, and nothing we will ever build in Syracuse will be considered high density. It's more of a medium density.
I'm gonna say that it's a descriptive word, and if people expect you to understand it to be one thing, it's whatever they call it. It's not something that's defined by.
Fair.
It's not something that you can say to somebody, your high density is not my high density, therefore you're wrong.
There was a perfect exercise in the visioning meetings though for that.
What they consider high density, that was interesting.
And so there was a fairly common idea of what high density was, and it was usually like a 6-story apartment complex. So these are medium densities, but at the same time, I still don't like the idea of apartments, but in the mixed use, I think there's some place for it, but I still, if they can make it work with townhomes, I would prefer that.
If there's no max in an ordinance, how do you keep from being arbitrary? Because our council could think that a 20-acre unit, 20-unit acre per acre looks great, and 2 years from now they could say 15 looks great, and then it could be 30, and
yeah. Well, so the market actually fluctuates over time with what's feasible, and sometimes the market bears more and sometimes it doesn't. But pictures are very powerful, and the way we're regulating density now, we're actually like double and triple down on the density, because you have maximum lot size, you have units per acre, and you have maximum height. So all of those things can limit density, and you can still have components of that. You can do hybrid form-based codes where you maybe still have some control over a height limitation, or if we want to set a ceiling on the units per acre, as long as it's, you know, something to consider is just because the unit, I mean, usually the developer will max out the units per acre, but if you set it where the market bears it, and as long as they are doing the form, they don't always to a certain point, they won't always build to the absolute maximum units per acre.
Yeah, if you look at like Farmington's example, they, they don't have a maximum density, but they have a maximum height of 6 stories. And so, and they probably have like parking requirements and things like that that actually affect what you can build, because you gotta have save room for parking. So there are limits, they're just not prescribed limits, they're natural limits.
Yeah, and what we're seeing is, we see proposals from the developers come in all the time, and they'll say, yeah, I wanna build this office building, but I also wanna build all this other stuff with it too. So if there's flexibility, sometimes, you pay whatever you guys want, but you could get the office if the other stuff comes with it, but alone, a lot of time that we have to either incentivize it or wait until the market bears it.
So I had several discussions with Brigham when he was here about Farmington's ordinances and why they made such radical changes in their ordinance. And really it was a basis of the ends justified the means. And so with somebody that said, I'm going to bring X number of commercial and I'm going to provide this kind of development and it's going to impact your city in this way, are you willing to take on the 6-story apartment complexes to go with it? Now, to that, I say that each development has to have an end that justifies what we're asking. I mean, if somebody said, we say you don't have a zone for 16 units per acre, but if you allow me to do 16 units per acre on your main road, I'm going to provide 30% office space to go with it. Now I have to consider, do I need that office space, and is it worth giving up this? That's a decision I can make. If you just say, arbitrarily pick a number and you say, okay, 25 is my max, but if one guy comes in and says, I want to do 25 units per acre, and it's going to include no other incentive for the city gets nothing out of this other than a bunch of apartments, I don't care if he says he wants 6 per acre, the city gets nothing out of it. It's not a good fit.
So it sounds like 100% with that, and that's why I really like this idea of not putting a number on it.
So just do mixed use be a more form-based, and we kind of identify what we want in each of these areas?
I mean, I want to approach it with caution. I don't want to leave it so wide open that people come and say, hey, you don't have a limit, so I want 100 units per acre, and
But then we could laugh at it.
And we would laugh at it. Yeah. But I guess my point is that we probably need to kind of figure out how we explain what we do want. Because to me, the greater good is, what do I get with this? If you help my commercial, which will offset citizen taxes, then people are going to be a little more comfortable. If I say I'm going to put density of housing and no commercial, then everybody bears that burden a little bit more, and that's harder on residents, and that's not fair.
Make sure there's that connection. Yeah, I have some experience in form-based code, and it's up to you guys how you want to proceed. If you want, I could present some more information to this council, or if you want planning commission to explore form-based code and come back with something, we could do that. Or if you guys,
I'd like to come to us first. I kind of want to get an idea. I'd hate to run it to the commission and then we just come be like, that's terrible, forget that.
Yeah, I want to make sure, I really like the thought and the discussion we've had, but I want to make sure that there's enough other tools in there to protect this.
And seriously, the planning commission will appreciate if we nail out a little bit more of what we're looking for instead of just say, figure it out and then send it to us.
Bring us a rock. That's not the rock I wanted.
Go find the rock I wanted.
To make this more, geared towards what we want, I think we need to decide what our goals are. For example, I think in our town overlay, one of our goals is to encourage commercial. So anything that somebody brings us that doesn't actually accomplish that doesn't fit the form. If somebody says, well, hey, it fills a hole in your property, I'm not here to fill in holes. I mean,
None of us have any incentive to build out Syracuse within our term of office.
No, that's not my individual responsibility.
I like Syracuse, but if a good opportunity presents it that
right.
behooves the city and the citizens thereof, then we are willing to consider that.
If a commercial
Goal's not
use
to reach
came in,
60K by 2020.
you know what, honestly, we talked about this before, and if a commercial property came in and said, you know what, you may have to twist some conditions for me, but I'm gonna buy your city's water tower problem out and just pay for it, and I'm gonna take some other problems and pay for it, I'm a lot more flexible, because you just took a lot of weight off my citizens.
Let me ask you guys another
Got
question.
25 units in a Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, anybody who will put
Chick-fil-A,
a
that
Chick-fil-A
goes-
If you had said
on
Costco,
their
you could have.
property.
Council, we're down to 3 minutes and no,
Okay.
no, you had made, we're gonna make it.
We're gonna have to have more time on this.
Yes.
Yeah, but I like, come back, with some ideas of form-based.
Sure, I'd be happy to present that. I was gonna ask you, this might take longer than 3 minutes, but, so we touched on the idea of being proximity to commercial, and I think we all agree with the idea that this has to benefit commercial,
Yeah.
sales tax,
Agreed.
and jobs, and
I think
daytime
we're coming back
population.
from everything.
So there's an argument that daytime population, they shop and eat lunch, and then that boosts other numbers, but there's also an argument that when residential density is located right next to a shopping center, that all those people go and buy stuff at the store. So do you guys buy into that?
A little.
That?
I mean, not 100%. It's not like somebody says, well, I wanna now rip out the Walmart parking lot and put in high-rise apartments because that's gonna support Walmart. No, we still need a place to park for all of those of us who don't live in that building. So, and I also think there's no need to discuss something that starts putting stuff in places that we don't have a need for it. Like, I don't want a high-rise apartment building next to the gates of Antelope Island. That's just too far away from the middle of town.
There's that connection between, will this boost commercial?
Will this boost commercial? Then
Okay.
yes, I'm flexible. If this doesn't serve anything but the guy who wants to build apartments, you gotta bring me something.
And it does make sense that it will boost it because, like, where my son lives right now, he's finding all these great little restaurants that he's going to and doesn't come down to Syracuse to go out to eat anymore. Just saying.
Yep.
Okay, thanks guys.
Okay. It's been a good
Thanks for asking that question.
Yeah.
It's been a good discussion.
That's good.
Let's move to, item 5 on the agenda,
J5.
J5,
Do we
J3?
have a moment for a bathroom break? If not, can I just go on my own?
I already did
Teacher?
that.
We didn't do 3, did we?
We did not do 3.
Let's do 3.
Can we request a 5-minute recess?
Alright, I'm just taking matters into
I already took that.
Let's, can you be back here in 5?
She's already
It
gone,
started
so,
at 5:30.
Yeah, I'll be back. I'll be back in 2.
And I have a 5:30 flight.
In the morning? Might as well just not go to bed.
I probably will.
Totally understand.
See, I did it the other way, so that I
I
landed
know.
before city council.
I know.
Jordan, you mentioned you hadn't been to the museum. One thing that you might be interested in over there is an original
Two-headed calf?
print of the Book of Mormon in our museum.
Wow.
I did not know that. See, I need to go over there, but like my wife has been there like 15 times, but she's always, it's kind of like,
Take your Cub Scouts, you're a leader, take your Cub.
I'm not the leader.
Oh, you're not?
But-
You were wearing a uniform, what,
Well,
the
he was,
robotics things, are you not anymore?
I was.
Oh.
But
Take your Scouts.
wait, I gotta get back to where I was
It's
going.
in a
with
case
that.
though, so you can't.
You can't actually read it.
Oh, but it's kind of the same thing as Hill Air Force Base. So I have all the Fridays off, and all the museums are closed on Fridays. I would love to go to Hill Air Force because the SR-71 is my favorite plane in the whole wide world. I could just go sit and stare at it.
I've never been there either.
Aren't they open on Saturday?
They're open on
I've been there
Saturday.
so many times.
Possibly, but
It's great, and you'll see
You don't want
something
to
new
get over
every time.
Saturday for it, it's not
Yeah.
that important, right?
No, but to that point, I've been to Hill Air Force Base multiple times. I would go more if they were open on Fridays, but I've been there. I go there probably every other year.
Do not miss the first part where they have all of the uniforms, like a history of uniforms in that first
Oh yeah, like I said, I'm a huge history buff.
But a lot of people will skirt by it and go right to the plane. Don't forget that room.
It's usually because we're chasing a kid who
I
wants
know.
a big shiny thing.
It's true.
Yeah, but yeah, so just Syracuse Museum is never open at a time I am at my house.
And maybe that's part of our discussion, is we need to consider.
Or maybe that's intentional.
They had more staff than they probably stay open.
Their age.
Yeah.
They gotta go home.
I just figured they didn't want me.
What's that?
And they gotta go to bed early.
Yeah.
My bad. Thank you, Paul.
What did you do?
Oh,
I made
we're
a suggestion on
discussing.
policy.
Sorry,
We were
we're
bringing it to the
discussing.
policy realm, we don't do that, right?
Oh.
You know what else they have besides a two-headed calf over there? Is a barbed wire collection.
That's pretty cool too.
I've been told you also gonna milk a cow.
My teacher in
Yes, not a
seventh
real
grade
cow.
had a barbed wire collection.
But a
It was
pretend
pretty
cow.
cool.
My question is, do they have any sugar beets?
They do.
They do, yeah.
See?
Pretend sugar beets.
They even have an RC Willis
Well, you
section.
can't keep them forever, you know.
Do we have a bag of sugar beet flour? Or sugar? Sugar beet sugar.
Sugar beet sugar.
The other.
The
I
other
don't think I've
sugar.
ever had sugar beet sugar. Is it
It-
purple?
That's what they harvested
We're gonna
before.
do 3 when we reconvene.
Is it purple?
I don't believe
I don't
it
know.
is.
Purple sugar?
Mike?
Well,
What
that's-
color is sugar beet sugar?
Because a beet
It's white.
only becomes
It's
purple
white.
when it gets pickled,
It's
so
white. Well,
it's
no.
white naturally.
They-
right?
I like
they
sugar
bleed off,
general,
you know,
but make
you-
it pink and it's even more fun.
But no, it's white. It's just.
I think we need to find a bag of sugar
Fructose
beet
in it.
sugar to go in that museum.
Maybe we need a
You have to order
field
it from
trip to the
China.
museum for us to really understand.
I think that would be in order.
That would be in order,
Okay.
a council
You can
visit.
fill it with
I wanna go in the little cabin.
Your body doesn't know the difference, let's put it that
We
way.
talked about that being
A bed and
Your body
breakfast?
doesn't know
a
the
winning,
difference between-
like if you win a contest at Heritage Days, you get to stay a night
No,
in the
that's my
cabin.
wife.
That would be
Oh, I know.
awesome.
A lot of people believe it, but the fact is that glucose is.
I would,
glucose.
hey, you oughta try it.
Cells don't care.
Yeah.
Just have to have.
No, are we ready to go?
You have to have
Yes,
what?
I'm ready.
it's reconvened.
Alrighty.
Well,
You can
we're
get
at,
it flavored different.
we're at number
We
3,
have porta potties
J3,
over at we have
and little
facilities
business
over
park.
at the splash pad.
Okay, business park development agreement. On a previous show, we discussed, the business park, and there was a potential rezone. And the rezone to business park would have prohibited the self-storage use, which like we talked about, was, underperforming compared to maybe some other things that could be built there.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we felt that a project now is better than waiting for something that, bird in hand is worth two in the field. And so, but we did still have concern about the number of jobs that would be provided in just a 100% storage unit complex. And so the direction was given that why don't we work with the applicant, which applicant is here and was willing to work with us to build in conjunction with the self-storage a flex office warehouse use that would house some local businesses. So what we've done is provided a draft development agreement. It's in the packet. There was an updated one that I uploaded to the Dropbox earlier. There's some minor changes, but the main points of the agreement are that there's essentially 3 areas to the agreement. There is the flex office space, and that's around 3 acres. Then there's a storage area, and that's around 4.5 acres. Then there's a future phase, or future, what we're calling it, that the limitation is it won't be any more than 50% storage. We just don't want another storage unit right in a storage complex. And so the goal is to just keep continuing with the flex if it's successful, but the developer was cautious about not being successful and being forced into building a lot of this flex if he wasn't able to lease it out.
I'm so excited for the car dealership.
I do know
Okay.
that at the V vault, or the vault, whatever it is, place, they were filled before they opened. They had agreements with everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's my concern. When we do development agreements, we're supposed to see a concept, right? I don't see a concept in the packet.
Yeah, it's blank.
Not necessarily, but we do have a concept, and I can pull that up for us.
Well, because that's what we said we're doing going forward. We
It
need to
just-
see it.
Yeah, let me see
There's
if I can-
obviously exhibit A and B, wherever those are.
There's blank.
I know,
Okay.
I was being facetious, I apologize.
It's okay, we don't get.
I'm not approving
That's the
anything.
concept.
Blank
We
checks
haven't
don't work
gotten
for the city.
irony since 1974 when I was the only practitioner.
Okay, sorry guys.
Yeah, exhibit B is missing, as is exhibit A.
What movie is that from? You didn't even see it?
What? What'd you say?
About, what movie is that? About irony, yeah, we don't get that here. I was the only practitioner at that convention, so before I quit because I was tired of being stared at. It's from Roxanne.
Yeah, I'm looking for that. You're faster than me.
You guys know your
Great
movies.
movie.
I think I've got it right
I
here.
usually don't get my quotes.
You got it?
That's a nice sweat, there it is.
Okay, so the developer provided a sketch and then I overlaid it over the parcels. You can see buildings 1 and 2 are off. These are the existing 2 buildings.
Okay.
Here's the cul-de-sac, here's 193. And so essentially this 4.5 acres I was telling you about would be the storage units, which would be hidden from view from 193.
My first thought when I see that is, that doesn't look like anything like what they handed and passed around council when they asked us if we would be okay with them
Yeah.
doing an enclosed
Do
storage
they-
unit.
Do they have architectural depictions of all of this?
That doesn't look at all like what
They're-
they said.
Yeah, the pictures that they provided would be a kind of the office building, and that stuff they showed you would be something that you would see from the end of the cul-de-sac.
That's not how it was presented.
Where would any car sales be?
So, and he has his pictures that he showed you before, and we could probably put those in the development agreement.
Yeah, they will match exactly what we showed you. This facility will match exactly what we showed. We just don't have elevations there, it's just an overlay, just a site.
And I guess I misunderstood because I thought we were talking about an enclosed building, not yards and yards of tin sheds.
Yeah, so that's something that we need to talk about, and whether or not we want more
We
detail
were
in the
specific to
agreement.
saying that we didn't, these were not gonna be the tin sheds.
And is that a road on the,
Looks like in between.
on the left?
This is a power corridor,
Okay.
and that dotted line is the
Easement.
actual line, like the power line, so they can't build structures underneath that.
Okay.
So this would be the storage unit that would look like what the pictures he showed you.
So there's never gonna be a road or a development next to
No.
this? Okay.
This is, you can't build structures underneath the power corridor. And then these buildings here would be the flex buildings where, similar to what you see in
On the
the
vault.
vault.
Mhm.
And then the intent is for the car dealership to occupy kind of this edge position here, and then there could be some leasing that goes on with Rocky Mountain Power and use their parking under here, and then work with UDOT to get a curb cut right in here.
That's a really small.
That's a small parking lot.
It's a small
Small
dealership.
dealership.
Well, one of the things that we talked about is that it couldn't be a little
Interesting.
10-car used car lot.
And that's kinda what it looks like.
Their current one in Provo, I've looked at the aerial, and it's probably 10 or 20 cars, and I don't think he would be, or the storage unit would essentially lease out this space, and they're looking at different companies that might wanna, the operators that would locate there. So the advantage of having the car dealership is that they would provide sales tax, but as far as whether or not they'd be required to, if something else leased up here, the intent is that we have lots of small businesses and opportunity above what would happen.
I like the other flex
Yeah.
space. I don't think that that's really a viable
Parking lot for cars.
Yeah, so it's kinda hard to tell, but
Yeah.
they would have parking under here as well, so the parking lot would be bigger, but I
Oh, I
don't think
see
that
what you're saying.
this
So you
isn't
can park under the
this
car.
isn't like a Ford dealership, if that's what we had in mind. Yeah, this is a used car lot, like
Okay.
if you've been up in Clinton,
I
like
gotcha.
the
With
cap one in
Like
kind
not
of.
a cap, like a smaller one, they would probably have a service bay and some cells. But, and that was really the concern in the first place, is that this is less than what would have happened. But, you know, without having to, this is taking the place of changing this to business park. So this is helping it perform a little bit more in the jobs and the sales or the property tax category. And then the future, the intent is to keep continuing on over here and then having more storage over here, so it'd be about 50-50. Or if that's not successful, you never know, there might be another kind of similar building.
Can you
to what's
remind
already
me, are storage units considered a service?
Storage units?
You mean for tax base?
They don't pay sales tax,
Well,
do
that's
they?
they don't right now.
We sell merchandise that they do.
So
By
like
the way,
boxes and stuff, that
where it is-
generates
where
sales
it is
tax
is
break.
that
Council, I'm gonna move us on in 2 minutes.
Well, it should be. I agree.
Yeah, so we need to know
I feel
if
like this isn't what was
you like it
represented.
or not like it.
No.
Through the roof.
Do you have any input as far as?
I guess I was expecting the car dealership to be, if that was part of this, that it would be a little bit larger than like a 10-car corner car lot. The storage units, I feel like we wanna make sure that it looks nice. I know we're saying that at the end of the cul-de-sac it'll look nice, but the rest of it, we do wanna make sure that it looks, I just don't want a junky area of the city. That, we wanna try and make sure this all looks nice. And so I would prefer that perhaps the flex space to storage unit ratio be slightly different than it is now. And that maybe we try and allocate a little more space for that office.
So the, one of the things I know Noah was working on, was, you know, making sure, at least from the visible field, right?
And I understand
On
that.
193, the architecture of that flex space would.
I guess I'd like to see what the rest of this is gonna look like. I understand that the one building is gonna look very nice. I wanna see what the rest of it is gonna be. If we've got a specific shed type in mind, like is it just gonna be dull metal gray with, I've seen some that actually look very nice. They've got, you know, grays and red trims, and they look very professional, whereas I've been in other ones that it just looks like they bought the cheapest tin structures they could get and threw a lock on it.
Yeah, so would you guys like to have
Concepts.
architectural elevations in there? Cause
don't think
I'm
I
sure
need-
he has elevations for the storage units, and then he's working towards the architecture on the flex space.
I think we need a little bit more of a concept, and I would also like to see if we can adjust the ratio to try and get a little bit more. Like I said, I don't need a huge car dealership, but I would like it to be something that doesn't remind me of something from a bad 70s movie.
Well, and we want to stay away from the feeling of some of the unplanned areas that happen to come about in different cities, and that feels very unplanned. That seems like that's gonna be an empty lot that somebody says, hey, do you mind if I park some cars here and try and sell them? And I think if we're trying to attract other businesses further west, and
So there's no guarantee it's gonna be a car dealership. It's just
Yes.
one of the potential uses.
And the other question is that, how do you get access to that? You have to drive.
They're gonna cut the curb over by Rocky.
Cut the curb on
And that's the
193.
If they can get that.
Yeah, that's not a guarantee.
Question.
If they don't get a
Council.
curb cut, they won't even be able to attract.
Council,
car
I'd like to have,
Exactly.
would you like to address this for just a minute?
Yeah,
And give us some ideas, and then maybe send them back to the drawing board with some elevations and other things. So,
Yeah, so to address some of your concerns, we do a block and mortar, so it's not just a tin structure.
Okay.
So we do a higher end, so it's not just like a tin structure where it's, and as I showed you before, this is our buildings and we would match this.
Those look nice.
Yeah, it would be the exact same thing as this, and then the flex space would match the existing buildings that are there. With the future flex space, we're open to a lot of different things there. I mean, if we could get a curb cut there and do Chick-fil-A, that would be perfect.
You have to talk to, Clinton.
Okay,
That's
so
what we want.
I need to see a
Or
picture
something.
of what the units look like, because I was under the impression that they were
You just said they're
inside
gonna be blocking,
units.
oh, okay.
No, that they were inside units in it, and all you're showing me is the office building.
Yeah, I do have online on our website, I don't have any, but I could provide those to Noah, cause I can show you what we have. But, yeah, but it's block mortar columns, it's not just a tin column, those tend to get hit and then they get bent and then they tend to look crappy after a short period of time.
Yep.
So that's why we always do block and mortar,
But are they cinder block and mortar, or are they actually like?
It's chip face, so we do a chip face block and then sew a band of chip face, so it looks.
Your website?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, just submit it all at the same time.
Okay, yeah, we can do that.
The other request, you guys, was that they wanted
There's
the
units
frontage
right there.
to look like our existing buildings.
I like
And so that was the goal, was get the flex space looking like the existing building so that it ran all the way through and then the storage would be behind it where you could see it. So that was kind of the goal we went after, was
Yeah.
to do that.
It's fine.
That looked good.
So there's some interior
And
there.
Yeah, so
where's
those are
their duck
interior
pond?
climate controls.
Is that there too?
No, I don't know where that came from. We do have PO boxes, but that's our conference room that we use. Those are boxes we sell and everything. I don't know where that.
The staff break room? Is that what that
I
is?
guess.
Yeah. So I'm not, yeah.
These are just, I don't even know, is that you?
It's off in Google. Yeah. No, I'm not sure.
You can kinda see what this outside.
Yeah, so it's chip face blocks.
Great.
We try to do a
Okay.
higher end.
That answers questions a lot.
Yeah, let's just get the concept in so we're not all panicking and.
Yeah.
And just to speak to the car dealership, we talked to a lot of car dealerships, about the acreage that they would desire. It's not like a huge Ford dealership, they need acres and acres to be.
Although I wouldn't be opposed to that.
I wouldn't either, if we could find a tenant that would do it, or Ford would be awesome, but
Be the whole
the
thing.
people that we've talked to want like half acre, three-quarter acre stuff, and so we're trying to appeal to what we can lease it to, and it's gonna be expensive to build it, and so we're just trying to build to what our research has told us basically, so. But I would love to, if we can work on it and just.
Yeah, if you can ditch the storage sheds and put in a Ford dealership, you have my support.
Alright, sounds good.
Why does it have to be Ford?
Okay, Toyota.
Were there any other issues in the draft that you saw? I mean, those are the main bullet points, is that those three areas that we wanna make sure it's not just a storage unit, and that he agrees to, and it's a lot more expensive than just the storage units, but he's agreeing to build the flex to
Yeah.
the north.
That
I think it
is a
helps
good
Yeah.
thing for sure.
That area.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do wanna get the concepts, but overall, seeing this and talking just where it wasn't in the packet.
Yeah. And we understand the whole storage unit, that's why we spend a little more money to make it look more of an asset to the community rather than just a tin stuff. Cause I worked at Extra Space Stores and they have a lot of those, and after a certain amount of years, they just look bent and mangled, and when cars hit them, it just looks terrible.
One of the minor modifications to the agreement in the packet is the trail. And along the south side of 193, there's no sidewalk.
Oh.
So the goal is to provide a safe place for pedestrians to walk without having to cross 193, go on the trail, cross 193 again. So from like where the school is, over the corner, because there's a lot of kids that live actually in Clearfield that will come across and go through there. So it's important to have a corridor through there, and so we've been kind of going back and forth trying to figure out what's best. And we've agreed that a 10-foot sidewalk or trail corridor, he would grant that as part of the site plan that would be identified in the future. So site plans are reviewed by planning commission, but if the direction that we're getting from you guys is that we want more detail, we could provide a more detailed site plan and or more detailed buildings. So are you guys more concerned with the buildings?
Both.
Both.
Let's just get a real picture of what's going on so that we can show our friends and neighbors what's going in over there, and not have to be like, well, what did you approve? And, well, they said it was gonna be great.
You have to approve it before you read it.
Yeah.
That's right,
Fair
you have to
enough.
prove it before you know what it is.
Okay.
Can I move us on?
Please?
Yes.
Let's move on. Okay, we've got the property
Nancy Pelosi.
at A1 professional office space, number 5.
Pass it before you read it.
So my first question on this one, is there a structure that we see here that's gonna go away? Or is that gonna stay and we're just gonna use?
I'm,
Rezone.
Where the
it's
rezone.
5 on the agenda.
Lindquist
Lindquist,
rezone.
okay.
Got it.
All right, there is a structure on the property that will be demolished.
Okay.
There.
Will they
it's
build
Lindquist
a
Mortuary.
residence on this property?
No, they'll combine those two parcels and they'll build a mortuary.
And it will just be mortuary?
A lot of times,
Sometimes
a lot of
they
times
have-
people live in the mortuary to go pick up people in the middle of the night.
It's a good question.
You used to do
That's
that
true.
when,
No,
yeah,
my
I
friend
remember.
too.
I had a lot of friends that was that's how they paid for colleges.
So we need
They
to
got
know
free room and
that.
board and
Okay, so 2000 West and
They love
where?
it.
You find out
It's
that
right across
it's
from
not a
Utah
big
and-
deal.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We-
We use certain rooms.
We don't allow live work in the professional office zone, so that would be problematic if that's what they wanted to do.
I wanna ask them that.
So the answer
There's
is,
a way around
is
it.
no, we don't
Just
allow
call
it.
a shift,
Yeah.
an overnight shift.
So this is the general plan, professional office here. And this is where they wanna go. After looking at this, it probably makes sense to clean up that boundary a little bit more so that it goes out to the middle of the road and
Yeah.
Yeah,
to
that's
the
a
north,
wonky
there's a
boundary.
detention basin. Yeah, it wouldn't make sense to have part of the road as agriculture and R1, so, and then to the south, there's another detention basin.
Oh, that's detention, okay.
Yeah,
I was
there's no
wondering what
development
that was.
potential there,
Yeah.
there, or there, cause they're both detention basins,
Okay.
unless somebody like bought it and redid it, but I think it'd be worth it to just clean it up and just bring that into the professional office zone.
Yeah, I would like to see it all in that zone, and then if they don't own it, who maintains that? We do?
We own that,
The cement one we did,
And-
yeah.
I think
Who owns
IHC
it?
owns that.
IHC does that one?
Yeah, 'cause that's
So
right.
is IHC going to actually clean that up a little bit? Just curious.
Cause I would like to
If
see.
there's a
it
code
cleaned up.
enforcement issue, we could respond. I wasn't
don't
aware
know.
that it was,
I don't know that it's necessarily like overgrown, but at the same time.
Yeah, I think they mow it and keep it, I don't think it's hairy.
Okay, anyway, I don't have a problem with this, and I welcome it into our city, so is there
Me
any
too.
objection to
No.
this?
And I also don't have a problem if somebody lives there. Is there a problem with approving that?
They can get away with it by calling it a shift worker, not a
Okay,
permanent
good.
residence.
Cause
we'd,
that's.
we'd have to
part of-
amend the
An
ordinance
overnight
if you
shift
wanted to do
worker.
that.
Okay.
We did that a couple years ago in the
And then
industrial
a couple
zone
to
to
do
do the live-in caretaker.
Okay.
So if you wanted to, it'd just be a separate item.
Well, let's let them ask and bring it forward,
Yeah.
but if they do, I understand it, it makes sense.
Completely.
Okay.
Okay, you good?
People do pass away and.
You wanna hand me the,
They don't always get noticed, till then. It's considered deep sleepers.
That's what you say, Annie, are you okay?
Annie, are you okay?
I just was gonna say the little Michael Jackson.
No. That's how you're supposed to.
Annie, are you okay?
Any, they call them Annie dummies for doing CPR. Is
Oh.
Annie,
Maybe
are you
that's
okay?
why
I went
Michael
right
Jackson
to
wrote
Michael
that
Jackson,
song.
too.
No.
Annie, are you okay?
Noah and I thought you
Maybe
might
it's
need
okay.
a little update on where we were with the 2050, and we wanted to share some information with you because we'd like to take this now to the planning commission. In the packet is every piece of material that we gleaned from that group of people.
200 pages.
Yeah.
Is that all in this presentation?
No.
We're gonna go through every single one.
Point by point.
All
Point
the-
by point.
He's gonna
No,
read
we're
it.
We've read it all.
We're gonna be 3 minutes here. I wanted to talk to you about what the composition of that group was, so that you could see who they were. There were 39 residents invited and 1 resident from the county. And then we opened that to an open meeting, and we had about 5 or 6 people that came. They always didn't sign the roll that were there, but over a period of those 6 meetings, we had about 6 different people that were there. Those were all residents. The mixture was 24 women and 26 men that were invited, okay? I appreciated your catch in helping make that more of a balance between.
That was Andrea.
the
It
gender,
actually was, yeah.
Landowners, we had 4 landowners that we invited to that meeting. We had 5 businesses that we invited and 1 member from the Chamber of Commerce that came. Institutions, we invited 5. That included people like Antelope Island, IEC, Tanner Clinic, the school board.
Did they come?
Not all of them. In fact, the most well attended was the school board.
The school board, yeah,
The
she
school
did a
board
great
was
job.
there. She was there. We invited 3 planning commission members to come. That was a total of 67 people. Okay. You invited you to come. There were 5 of you that were there on and off, and then the staff was there, and we asked you to be not involved with any kind of a bias or any comment. I want to thank you for that. I think because I think that you're going to see that the feeling here was that the city didn't bias this discussion. I'd like to talk about our attendance in the meeting. Here's the attendance rolls over those 6 meetings. We started high with a high of 32. We ended with our last meeting being, it wasn't the least attended, but the last meeting was 23. And sadly, the most underperforming group there was our business community.
Really?
Wow. And it wasn't the residents, our business community and the institution. We had pretty much just the school district that stayed with us all the way through. But as far as residents are concerned, we dropped 4 or 5 residents, but the residents were pretty consistent in their attendance at those meetings. We asked them some questions. We put together a survey and asked them to evaluate what we had done. And here's the first question. We used the training room of the Syracuse Police Department. Could you rate your comfort level in this facility? We rated that at 4.7 as the mean, but the median was 5, which means that there were more numbers at that 5 than there were below. So the median here was 5. In all of these questions, the median is 5. Were the audio-visual presentations helpful to your understanding of the issues discussed each week? The mean was 4.7 on that scale. The median again was 5. Were mapping and pie chart activities well explained and easy to complete? The mean was 4.43 and the median again was 5. Were the electronic survey activities interesting and a benefit to you? 4.63, and again, the median was 5. It has been our goal to provide factual documentation to the task force and then listen for feedback without bias. How effective have we been? 4.46, and the median again was 5. Now, where do we go from here? What's the path forward? And I'm not going to take the time to go through this because I'm just going to show you. It involved a little Michael Jackson. And what I was saying is that I want to play traffic cop now as the mayor. And what I'm going to do is I wanted to direct the scope of where we go from now to the planning commission. Okay, what zone are we talking about? Where residential and business are together? Mixed use, right? So we have the makers of policy and we have the guardians of policy. The makers of policy are, of course, all of you. It's the city council. The guardians of the policy are the planning commission. And the planning commission has a chair, that's Brent. And the city council has a liaison, and that's Corinne. And then we're going to involve the staff. I'll show you what we're going to do here in just a minute. But I want to make sure that it's understood that the communication between these two entities has to be one communication line. It needs to come from the council. It needs to all go through Corinne, and from Brent it needs to from the planning commission it needs to come from Brad, so that we don't cloud the issue. Because one of the things that I want to do is to make sure that we get to this before we get into the heat of the summer. I would like it done by July. So here is the scope. Here's the date. Today is the 26th of March. we're talking about the scope together. And I'm going to ask you to, this was on the front of the staff sheet that you saw. On April 22nd, Corinne, we'd like to present this to the Planning Commission.
Okay.
And maybe even this presentation, I don't know. Maybe you and I could talk about that with Noah and see what we do. And then on the 9th of April, the city council is all in pink. We have a normal business meeting agenda on the 9th of April. On April 16th, the Planning Commission will have a work session in their input, and the staff will present a first draft. Now, Noah, do you want to talk about how you're going to do that?
Yeah, we want to make sure that the planning commission doesn't get overwhelmed, and so we want their input. The staff is going to be presenting to them topics, not all the topics all over the place every time. So we're going to try to direct them so we stay focused and try to get this accomplished.
Something like we did in the visioning thing. Are you still talking about doing electronic surveys with them?
Yeah.
And so we'll take economic development one time, where should it be? And then what the staff will do is in the 2 weeks while they're gone, they'll put together a draft form of what we talked about that governs that in the master plan, in the general plan. So, yeah.
So to be clear, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. The general plan will be just that.
Yes.
It'll be a general plan, so
Yes.
we'll zone, perhaps it could be as much as broad as low density residential, medium density
Yes.
residential,
Yes.
commercial / mixed use.
Yes.
Yeah, we want to color with like
Yes. And
5 colors, where our zoning has like 11 colors.
Okay, good.
And we're going to take a page from what we learned with the parks master plan, is we want this to be very small. It shouldn't be very long.
Awesome.
So back to the planning commission for their second draft. They'll take this in 3 pieces as they go through. And again, I don't see the text document being much more than 6 or 8 pages. And then as they work on that very, very much abbreviated general plan map. So when we get down here to May 28th, there's no city council workshop because of Memorial Day. We won't be meeting on the 28th. You okay with that?
Thank
Okay,
you.
and then
Especially with graduation.
Yeah, because of graduation. On the 4th of June, we'll have a public hearing with the planning commission, and they'll be discussing a draft of this document, and will be open to public hearing. On the 11th, the first read here with the city council, okay? And the planning commission's mission will be complete. They're going to the public hearing and ask for a recommendation back from them on the 4th. The normal PC session on the 18th of June will not involve the general plan. The 25th, city council review final draft of the document in a work session here. And the 2nd, there's no PC because we're around the 4th. They won't be meeting on that day. And then on the 9th of July, the final review and approval. If we need that far, we'd like to have it done by the 9th of July if we can, so that we're out of the heat of the summer and we can move on to some other things. Now, there's one other thing I'd like to ask you if you'd be willing to participate in. I would like to see if we can't break down some of the them and us and the because they're the guardians of the policy and you're the policy makers. We really ought to be a team, and so I'm going to suggest on Thursday, July 11th, we meet together with them and their wives, and we have a little social like we had with the staff on that day and celebrated the job done. So if you'd kind of pencil in that date, and it's not a requirement. If somebody has something that comes up that you can't be there, that's understandable, but I would like to celebrate it. So, Corinne, maybe you and I could sit down and talk about how we would present this at Planning Commission with them and show them the same kind of thing.
Sure.
So, see if they, what I want them to do is I don't want this to go on and on. I want them to get to work and work on.
And I know that one of them was there pretty consistently, so that'll help as well.
Yes. Okay, that's all I have. Okay, thanks, Noah, and Noah did a heroic job with that, Noah and Royce, it was wonderful, you saw all the material. And if you wanna look at what the outcome of those meetings were, they're in the packet, you can look at those and, cause we're not gonna discuss them here, we'll discuss them at a later point.
Some of the comments were interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was reading, yeah. You really did a good job not being biased, though. I couldn't tell what direction any of you wanted to go in either.
Well, but all the speakers, they did see, there was a pretty common consensus that all the speakers were very biased.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay, quadrennial review, Noah, Rhodey, do you wanna go on?
Yeah.
with that?
Okay, this is the last quadrennial review for another couple years. Right, yeah. This is the Community and Economic Development Department per policy. We review every 4 years, so that we can ensure that we achieve the goals of our policy, which is to attract and retain the best talent we can, given the resources we have, for the benefit of our residents. Most of what we do as a city is a service, and that requires good people. So this is the outcome of the study. If you go into your Dropbox, there's the detailed PDF that includes each position and how the benchmarks came out for each position. When we review with the council to see if you have any questions or issues with it based on this benchmark. We looked at an overall impact on the budget, including benefits, would be $49,201. That wouldn't take effect until July 1 of 2019. All of there were increases in all of the positions except one in the marketplace. So that's just kind of how it worked.
The planner one goes down quite a bit. Do we have anybody working as a planner?
We do, we have one.
So can you remind me the role of positions that we've very recently hired? If someone's hired on a position?
Yeah, so if they were hired within the last 2 years, then they will accept the, they don't get the adjustment.
Okay.
So that would include being promoted in the last 2 years.
Unless they're below the minimum, so we'll at least pay people the minimum.
Yeah, okay. I just couldn't remember what that was, cause there's at least one here that would fall in that category.
Yeah, I think we had 2.
Okay. Yeah, cause you got the inspectors.
Yeah. We had a building permit tech also. That we paid the minimum. So that's the study for that. If there's any questions, I can fill them now.
Well, on one hand, it's nice the wages are going up, on the other hand, it's not good that wages are going up.
I'm concerned though that we spent a lot of time, and a crazy amount of time on wages with the intent that we weren't going to have the huge increases go ongoing, that somehow it was going to organically, through natural raises, keep up the pace. And the hope was, and at least it was shared amongst the optimism I felt from the staff, was that if we set things right, that we wouldn't have this kind of crazy adjustment. And yet after reviewing all departments and every one of them having to adjust up considerably, it's not that I fault anybody for what's going on in the marketplace, but it's hard to keep up with. And quite frankly, my biggest concern is where do you draw the line between paying people what they expect and outfitting them with the resources and equipment to do the job right? I mean, you know, if we've got to choose here, there's got to be a balance. We can't just say, oh great, there's an unlimited pot of money, because there isn't.
Right.
And some of these things have an adverse effect. fire chief's the only, well, the Cressner is still here, but I wouldn't want to say, chief, we give all your guys a raise, but I'm not gonna give you new fire hoses, cause I can't afford them. I mean, that would be awful.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's gotta be a balance in there, and I hate it. I mean, I don't wanna be the bad guy that says no to fair wages, but I also don't wanna be the guy that says, yeah, we can't afford to do a good job for the city because we have to cut resources. Cause we are,
I hear you.
balanced budget's mandatory. We don't get the option to go anywhere else.
Right, we're not federal government.
No.
Print.
I mean, we don't have a choice. We cannot go over.
Would you be willing to accept Syracuse City gift certificates?
So when you say that, Dave, isn't the idea that now that this last review's done, that then it wouldn't be big jumps after that?
Well, the point was that we thought we resolved it 2 years ago after almost a year of discussion. And the theory was, hey, we've just gone through this. We've just done work, you know, adjustments for all these people who are out of sync. And
did you go through everybody though?
oh yeah.
Okay, so at the time there were two issues, right? So at the time there was the compression issues that was sort of a fallout from the recession, and there was no correction with new people coming on board making more or as much as people who have years of experience. So that issue we addressed across the board, and is finalized. We feel that we don't
Hopefully
ever have
we're not hearing that
we don't have to address that again. The other issue was being competitive in the marketplace with what other cities are paying, and so that's what this is. Now it feels like we keep coming and getting hit, you know, a few times a year, but each department's only getting reviewed every 4 years.
Did you understand that part?
You know, there's like a feeling of.
It was 2 years ago.
I'm not unsympathetic to that part of it. It's just that the idea was that if we set a reasonable rate for increases to go throughout departments, that we were gonna avoid big jumps. And lots of departments had big jumps. So again, I'm not upset that the market adjusted as much as trying to figure out how to balance the budget.
Right, and I hear you.
Just
but we will have to balance the budget.
Yeah, and I don't want to do it at the expense of resources that are absolutely critical to these same people doing jobs.
Right.
We saw that in other departments, just one, let me finish. In other departments that were getting no resources, and that the expectation was out, you know, was that you were gonna perform at a top level without the backing to do it. It was impossible, and it was unfair. And I don't wanna say that to people, and I don't wanna say, gee, but at least you're getting paid good, but you figure out a way to make me think that you've got
you can actually do your
all
job.
the resources that you need, when we can't give them to you.
So we say, no, if you want your raise, then you gotta go get us a broader tax base. So we can pay for everybody else.
One thing I'd like to do on these, and this is just good statistics. Generally, I like when we're doing averages. At a minimum, we should throw out the high and the low. Because in all of these, and like I said, we do the high and the low. In all of these, there's always one that's just not like the others.
Like Clairfield.
So to your point, there is that involved. That so we do percentiles, not averages. So
it's still one
you're not
can really offset
you're not
one's.
so if you're the 60th percentile, if one is like really high, that out of 10, that's still only one. It's not.
But it's
you're
still
not
you should throw it out statistically. You should say,
you should throw out the highest and the lowest, and then deal with all the medians.
Which we can do.
Back
It
when
doesn't
we
change the
were
law.
doing this 2 years ago, I suggested
I think it's just a better way to do the
I hear you.
calculation.
I hear you.
Well, we talked about not necessarily, you know, you can get a situation where 9 are all within, you know, a really short percentile, and one of them's just an outlier. And we talked about that. We talked about, let's not include the outlier, because in some cases, one city may say, yeah, this guy's who's not here, public works guy, but he's also 5 other jobs, and that's why he's paid twice as much as every other public works
Well, it's
guy.
like, when
Yeah,
we,
Harriman,
the
you gotta be
bountiful
mad.
public works guy was there for like 35 years and
Yeah,
getting
and we
paid a
can't
lot
compete
more.
with that. Neither should we.
You gotta go back to the one that decreases. How do you
Well,
deal
we
with?
agreed not
Under
to
the
deal with
policy, they
that.
freeze.
They
So
just
we
don't,
bring them.
yeah, they stay where they are.
What
Nobody
happens is,
loses.
what happens is if that trend continues or if it stays the same, they top out earlier.
Yeah.
So.
We still,
Yeah.
people still need cost of living increases and things like that, which are generally 2 to 3%.
They just hit the ceiling and then they just top out. Even the merit increases, they don't, I think it's every 5 years.
All of us topped out about 12 years ago.
So this is informational right now.
Yeah.
That's where it is, working it into the budget, that sort of thing.
The heavy lifting's gonna come at the budget time.
But we do have policies that we can't just like, because frankly, if we just gave somebody a raise in the last 6 months, we can't give them a huge one again, and that's not our policy.
And I think, from what I've seen since I've been here, is that the policy has stabilized our situation. I think it's doing what you intended it to do. There's a lot less, looking to leave,
That's
for
good.
money.
That's good, because then you're
that
playing
kind of
the
stuff.
negotiation game up.
And we also talked about in the policy, good, solid performance reviews can help catch people up.
Right.
And that's, so we don't have to do it all at once. So if somebody and we're gonna have this situation, we've heard some tell that there might be some other movings in other departments. And as a part of those transitions, maybe somebody starts out at a lower end, but they can catch up with good positive reviews where instead of us having to eat it all at once, because that's just really hard.
But long story short, these guys, I think all these guys are doing a great job. And I hope we can give them all great raises, but at the same time, we do need to work within the budget, and I think
We're
we'll work through
very
it.
cognizant of.
Let's move on to M, new state legislative results.
Yeah, this is just a kind of a final wrap up. There is an error in the secondary water metering summary that's in the packet. So the bill that passed was the bill that just required that we put together a plan for secondary water metering.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Because when I read that, I'm like, did I miss something?
No, that was
Because I
an
actually
error,
read that
oversight.
through. When I gave my report, I actually looked up each bill and read them.
Yeah, so we do have to put together that report. We do have to meter all new ones, which we talked about earlier today. As far as the affordable housing one, that passed as well. We'll have to factor that into our general plan, and we do have to
It's just 2 of them.
choose 2 of the 23.
Yeah, choose 2 out of the 23, which we kind of figured we covered, right?
I think we might be as high as 5.
Yeah, I don't think we'll have a problem complying with that law.
No. And the thing is too, is that it didn't sound like it changed, that once you got those, then you had to move on to other things that you could continue with those
Yeah.
same things.
So, I don't know, Paul, did you see any kind of anything major in any of the others that, is gonna impact us in a huge budgetary
Do we have to
way or
report on that
anything?
I think did they actually change it to annual
It
reporting?
says annual in here.
Instead of biannual?
I believe
I'm
so.
pretty sure it was annual.
Yeah.
That was the other change.
What was that one for, the
The
water?
reporting.
For the affordable housing.
Oh,
We have to
affordable housing.
report
So there'll be a
every
little
year.
bit of,
It's
extra
gonna be
time
every year.
spent on that.
We'll just change the date and send it in again.
Good idea.
I'm glad you put that on the record.
They're not listening, they don't care.
We, from our last meeting to when they finished the session.
We're still compliant,
I did submit to all 3 legislators, your concerns with, those 2 bills, the affordable housing and the secondary water. I do know that on the floor, you can go on the line, and I did see, Representative Lisenby did argue against the bill, on the floor. It's recorded, the secondary water metering.
Yeah.
Speaker Wilson was conducting, so he wasn't doing any of the debate, but it still passed.
I think it passed, a lot of the attitude that I understood is just because we have a lot of representatives representing cities that don't have secondary water, so it's no loss to them.
So,
Okay.
just an update.
Thank you.
Hearing and seeing no public. Unless one of you wants to be a public. I'll pass over on that. Let's talk about the discussion of future agenda items, council and council announcements. There was some question I saw on an email about a health issue.
Yeah, I think we have to mention that online.
Let me finish. I'd like to ask Brody to just give a little accounting of what's been going on at the time. Can you tell us? Sure.
Yeah, we have a call into the health department. Obviously, we're not gonna do, we're not equipped to handle this situation, but we'll, I wanna start with their chief, epidemiologist to see if they're, where, I don't even think it'll end at the health department, but they'll know like where we need to direct any questioning as to whether they wanna investigate this or not.
Okay, that's good that we're at least gonna ask, can I help?
Well, and I would like it just on the record, even if we just discuss what your findings are as a council, so that they feel like we addressed it and that it wasn't just ignored, because they are privy to a lot of things.
Because sometimes, it's mentioned that staff has reviewed it and will take action. That's great. But I do want people to realize that on the record that we did do our job of bringing it forward. It is being addressed. And it really doesn't need to be more than a 1 minute, just reporting that, hey, that was validated and we passed it on to the right authorities.
Yep.
Thank you, council, for acknowledging.
Yeah, my intention
or
is.
there's no issue and.
Or there's no issue.
It's
Sure.
sad, that's unfortunate.
My intention was to just update you when I get the information from them.
That's okay, we just need it on the record.
And we could not put it on the agenda because the agenda.
No, for this meeting, it's already out.
And we really can't be discussing it, so.
Right. Okay, so other question was the woman who brought up the dog. Is that something we can discuss?
Oh,
We can discuss, but it needs to go on a future agenda. Just to follow up of how that gets handled, where we maybe a status of where these agencies are, and if we're supposed to do something different.
Generally, the council doesn't get involved in specific cases, so
No,
I would advise getting away from that, but if you wanna look at the overall, what is our response and what do we do as a city, is the animal control doing what it should in these types of cases?
Well, we can look at animal control.
Well, sure.
I don't wanna, I'm not so much concerned about what the result of that case is. I am concerned about procedure, so that if somebody else asks, I can say, this is what happens, and I want to know, or I know what to do in a situation like that. And likewise, we all received an email from Mr. Pratt about a location and some things associated with renters, and I think
Is that Gary?
Yeah.
He didn't send it to me, I wonder if.
Really?
Yeah.
He doesn't know yet.
He may not have your email yet.
Okay.
Maybe it's not.
Maybe.
Can we forward it to you?
Or maybe he doesn't like me.
Absolutely. Anyway, the point would be that I'm not so much concerned about the outcome of the specific case as I am to be kind of advised as to when an issue like this happens, how it's handled, and what the appropriate responses are and responding groups are. So again, not necessarily that, but we should as a council say, yeah, that came forward, and we dictate, or this is how it's being handled, we're all now aware.
Yeah, and I think, so I sent out an email on that too earlier today, that Paul's gonna draft a memo on kind of options and issues to be aware of in those cases.
And it could be as much as, you know what, all of the right procedures are in place right now. I'm okay with that too, if that's where we are. Again, it's just a matter of, you know, we need to, if somebody says, hey, your policies and procedures are not working, I need to figure out if they are or not.
In the meantime, do we want to defer answering either of those emails to somebody within the city staff so that they're answered appropriately, so we're not adding our opinion on something?
I think that's fine.
That's out of whack.
Right now, it could be just as simple as,
I mean, we can still.
we're looking into it.
I've already said that, I mean, I said basically
and
that, I said
we're getting some legal
advice.
counsel,
Yeah.
just
That's
stand
what I
by.
mean.
Yeah, that's
You
what
know,
I
it
said
could be just as
without.
easy as that.
Okay. That's,
You know,
yeah.
give them a 2 or 3 week time frame.
Yeah, I just don't want to give the impression that, oh, well, sure, we're gonna resolve this for you. Yeah,
No.
like, not.
Yeah, we need to look into it first.
We're just a legislative branch.
But if that, we are
some
also the
things
people who
we
should
don't
bring it
legislate on.
forward if somebody
Exactly.
says, yeah, I've tried all the options that I know of, you know.
If the policies aren't working,
Yeah.
yeah, you're in
That's
play.
what, and with this dog person, I don't think I shared my response, but my first response was just, it looks like you've gone to the right people. They're probably the most responsive you're gonna get. I will check and see if there's more we should deal with. Because it's not, I mean, I can't go and get involved in somebody's dog, but I could, but I don't really want to.
I wouldn't want to.
But there was mention of a code violation, and so that's
Right.
where we.
And a code
we work-
violation needs to be
that
addressed.
we know how to deal with.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I don't have anything,
Okay,
I've
we're
written all the reports.
I'm gonna stand this down, let's go.
Oh, I never got a chance. I was
So
gonna
it was
say,
fun.
we found, we've set the